Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I remember the first time I walked through her apartment door, the winter air still clinging to my coat as I stepped inside. The space was quiet, too quiet, with that particular stillness that lingers after something has gone wrong. As a detective for 15 years, I've developed a sense for when a case will follow me home. This one I knew instantly would be whispering in my ear for months to come. Her name was Eliza Chen, 26, a graphic designer who had moved to the city just 4 months earlier, seeking the anonymity and opportunity that urban landscapes promise. The apartment was her first solo living arrangement, a modest one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone. Rent was reasonable for the area, which should have been the first red flag. Unfurnished, her mother had told me over the phone that morning, her voice carrying that particular weight of parental concern. Eliza was so excited because it was unfurnished. She wanted to make it entirely her own. I moved through the space slowly, letting my eyes adjust to the soft amber glow of the table lamp, the only light source currently illuminating the apartment. Through the window I could see snow beginning to fall, individual flakes catching the amber streetlight before disappearing into darkness. My partner, Tors, was speaking with the building manager down in the lobby. I preferred these initial moments alone with a scene. It lets me feel the space before it becomes cluttered with voices and theories. The apartment still held Eliza's presence, a navy blue throw blanket draped over the arm of a modest gray sofa, a collection of watercolor paintings, her own work I would later learn, arranged in a precise grid on the wall. A single mug, half filled with cold tea, sat on the coffee table beside a closed laptop. Everything was ordinary, everything except for the small electronic component now resting in an evidence bag in my pocket. I made my way toward the bedroom where it had all started. The door was partially open, revealing a slice of pale blue wall and the edge of a neatly made bed. I pushed it wider with a gloved hand. The room was minimalist, a bed with white linens, a simple nightstand, a dresser with a small potted plant. And there, in the center of the ceiling, was the empty bracket where the smoke detector had once been mounted. It wasn't a smoke detector, of course, not really. Eliza had discovered that 3 nights ago. She'd been lying in bed reading, a detail she'd emphasized when she came to the station, when she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A tiny red light, blinking intermittently from within the smoke detector directly above her bed. Being tech-savvy, she found it suspicious. Smoke detectors didn't typically have blinking red lights visible from the outside, not like that. It was around 11 p.m. when curiosity finally overcame her. She'd stood on her bed, reached up, and twisted the device free from its mount. It came away easily, too easily for a properly installed safety device. When she turned it over in her hands, she immediately knew something was wrong. It was lighter than it should be. No battery compartment. Just a small covered panel that, when slid open, revealed a micro SD card and a tiny camera lens. I crossed to the window and looked out at the building across the street. From this angle, no other apartments had a direct view into this bedroom. Privacy was part of what had attracted her to this unit. That privacy had been completely illusory. The weight of the evidence bag in my pocket felt suddenly heavier. We had the device now, and the IT team was already working on the SD card. Initial examination had been disturbing. Dozens of videos, meticulously dated, showing Eliza asleep in her bed. The earliest file was time-stamped from her very first night in the apartment. Someone had been watching her from day one, Tors said quietly from the doorway, startling me slightly. I hadn't heard him come up. I nodded, taking in the ceiling mount once more. What did the building manager have to say? Torres flipped open his notebook. Interesting stuff. The apartment was vacant for just 2 weeks before Eliza moved in. Previous tenant was a man named Gabriel Walsh, lived here for 3 years, no complaints, always paid rent on time. Left suddenly, citing a job opportunity in Seattle. Have we verified that? Working on it, Torres leaned against the doorframe. The manager mentioned something else, said maintenance never installed smoke detectors in the individual units, only in the hallways. Building code only required hallway coverage given the age of the structure. I felt the familiar tingle at the base of my neck, the sensation that always comes when pieces begin connecting. So the previous tenant installed it. Or someone else entirely. Tor's voice was steady, professional, but I could hear the undertone of disgust. Cases involving surveillance always carried a particular kind of violation. I moved toward the bed and crouched down, examining the space beneath it. Nothing but clean hardwood floor. The camera's field of view was focused directly on the bed, I murmured. Nothing else in the room, just the bed. Classic voyeurism, Torres offered. Maybe. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting the movement, but there's something methodical here. The placement, the timing, starting from her first night, almost like she was specifically targeted, Torres finished. We both fell silent, letting the weight of that possibility settle in the quiet room. Outside, the snow was falling more heavily now, muffling the sounds of the city. I crossed to the closet and slid the door open, revealing a carefully organized collection of clothing, practical, professional attire punctuated by the occasional burst of color or pattern. Did the manager have access to tenant applications? I asked, running my gloved fingers along the row of hanging clothes. Torres nodded, already requested them. Should have both Eliza's and Walsh's files tomorrow morning. The closet held nothing unusual. I closed it and turned my attention to the dresser, opening each drawer carefully. Eliza had already thoroughly searched her own apartment after discovering the camera, looking for additional devices. She hadn't found any, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Detective, Tor's voice had shifted, softer now. I turned to find him holding his phone, the screen illuminated in the dim room. It just sent over preliminary findings from the SD card. There's something you should see. He crossed the room and handed me his phone. On the screen was a still frame from one of the videos, Eliza asleep in her bed, the timestamp showing 2:14 a.m. from 3 weeks ago. But what made my breath catch was not the sleeping woman. It was the partially visible figure standing in the corner of the room, watching her. There's more, Tor said quietly. In several of the videos, someone enters the room while she's sleeping. Never approaches the bed, just watches, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for over an hour. I stared at the image, at the shadowy figure barely captured at the edge of the frame. Does she have any idea? I asked. Torres shook his head. None. We didn't tell her about this part yet. Wanted to verify what we were seeing first. I handed the phone back, my mind already racing through implications. We need to know how they were accessing the apartment. Check all locks, windows, fire escapes. Already on it, forensics is on their way. I moved back to the center of the room, looking up at the empty bracket where the camera had been. The hole in the ceiling seemed to stare back at me, a void where something sinister had once watched. The thought of Eliza sleeping peacefully below, completely unaware of the eyes upon her, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the winter night. She can't come back here, I said firmly. Tors nodded. She's staying with her mother for now. Said she never wants to set foot in this place again. I couldn't blame her. Even standing here now, knowing the camera was gone, I could feel the lingering sensation of being observed. It clung to the walls, settled in the corners. "We need to talk to Walsh," I said. "If he installed the camera, if he has the footage." "And if he didn't?" Tors asked. The question hung in the air between us. If Gabriel Walsh wasn't responsible, then who had access to the apartment? Who had been standing in that corner, watching Eliza sleep? And perhaps most disturbingly, why had they left the camera for her to find? As if reading my thoughts, Tors spoke again. "You know what bothers me most? That blinking light. If someone went to the trouble of installing a hidden camera, why would they leave a visible blinking light, almost like they wanted her to find it?" I finished. The realization settled heavily in my stomach, or they wanted us to find the footage of the observer. My hand went to the evidence bag in my pocket. What had initially seemed like a straightforward case of privacy violation was evolving into something more calculated, more complex. Someone had been playing a longer game, one where Eliza's discovery of the camera wasn't an ending, but merely a beginning. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in silence. Standing in that blue bedroom, I knew with absolute certainty that somewhere out there, in the quiet streets below, someone was still watching, waiting, and Eliza Chen's nightmare was far from over. I just had to figure out who, before they decided to do more than simply watch. Story 2. The soft glow of my computer screen was the only light in the room, casting long shadows across the walls of my new office. Outside, the spring rain tapped gently against the window, a soothing rhythm that normally would have lulled me towards sleep. But sleep was the furthest thing from my mind as I navigated through the folders on my newly issued work laptop. It was well past midnight, that liminal hour when the world feels both impossibly quiet and strangely alive with possibility. I'd been with the digital forensics unit for just 3 days. The laptop had been set up by it and handed to me with little ceremony, just another tool for the job. Nothing about its sleek, professional exterior suggested what I was about to discover. The system folders were organized with military precision, everything labeled, everything categorized. That's why it caught my attention immediately. A single file nestled in a subfolder of temporary data, simply named "Do Not Open." No extension, no identifiers, just those 3 words run together like a whispered warning. In my line of work, warnings are meant to be heeded, but curiosity is also the backbone of investigation. My finger hovered over the trackpad, hesitating. The rain continued its gentle percussion against the glass, a metronome marking the seconds of my indecision. I clicked. The file opened instantly, too quickly for any normal data load. The screen flickered once, twice, then filled with a grid of thumbnails. Images, hundreds of them arranged in neat rows that scrolled down beyond what I could see. Each thumbnail was small, but even at that size I could make out human faces, all of them frozen in what appeared to be mid-scream. My breath caught in my throat. I clicked on the first image. It expanded to fill my screen, a woman perhaps in her 30s, her face contorted in what could only be described as pure terror. Her mouth was open, eyes wide, skin pale beneath the harsh light that illuminated her. The background was dark, indistinct, no context, no clues, just raw human fear captured in pixels. I moved to the next image, a man this time older with the same expression of primal fear. Then another, and another, each face different ages, different ethnicities, different features, but united by that same horrific expression. terror rendered into digital form. The room around me seemed to grow colder as I scrolled through the grid. My trained eye searched for patterns, for clues. Were these crime scene photos, evidence from some case I hadn't been briefed on, but there was something off about them. The lighting was too consistent, the angles too uniform, as if they had been taken by the same person in the same place under the same conditions. I reached for my phone to call my supervisor, but stopped. It was nearly 1 in the morning, and what exactly would I say? That I'd opened a file clearly labeled not to be opened, that I'd found disturbing images on a department-issued device. I needed to understand what I was looking at first. I began to catalog what I could observe. None of the subjects appeared physically harmed. There were no visible wounds, no blood, just fear, pure, undiluted fear. I estimated there were over 200 images, all apparently taken within the last few years, judging by the clothing styles and image quality. The methodical nature of my work provided a thin barrier against the growing unease spreading through my chest. Who were these people? What had caused their terror? And most importantly, why was this file on my laptop? I continued scrolling, moving faster now, watching the faces blur together in a mosaic of horror, until I reached the last image. My finger froze on the trackpad. Unlike the others, this photo wasn't of a stranger. It showed a reflection, my reflection, captured in what appeared to be a computer screen. Me, sitting exactly as I was now in the same office, wearing the same clothes I had on at that very moment. The image showed me looking at the computer, my expression neutral, unaware. But behind me, barely visible in the darkened reflection of the screen, stood a figure, tall, indistinct, watching. I spun around in my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. The office was empty. The rain continued its gentle patter against the window. Nothing moved in the shadows. With shaking hands, I turned back to the screen. The image was still there, me, and the figure behind me that wasn't there in reality. I closed the file, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. A cold sweat had broken out across my forehead. Sleep was impossible that night. I spent the hours until dawn running virus scans, checking file properties, looking for any clue about the origin of what I'd seen. The file properties showed it had been created just 20 minutes before I'd opened it, while I was alone in the office, while no one else was in the building. The next morning I arrived early and went straight to my supervisor, Detective Morales. Her office was small but immaculate, with case files stacked in perfect alignment on one corner of her desk. She listened without interruption as I described what I'd found, her expression betraying nothing. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, "Did you bring the laptop?" I nodded and placed it on her desk. She opened it, navigated to the system folder where I'd found the file, but it wasn't there. We spent an hour searching through every folder, every hidden directory. Nothing. The file labeled "Do Not Open" had vanished as if it had never existed. Could it have been some kind of test? I asked finally. Something to see how new recruits respond. Morales shook her head slowly. "We don't do that kind of thing here, Jensen." She closed the laptop and pushed it back toward me. "Have it check it out. Could be malware, some kind of sick joke." But her eyes told a different story. There was something there, recognition perhaps, or fear. It found nothing, no malware, no unusual programs. All system logs showed normal activity. According to their analysis, no file matching my description had ever existed on the machine. I might have believed them, might have convinced myself it was stress or exhaustion playing tricks on my mind, if not for what happened next. 3 days later, a case file landed on my desk, a missing persons report. The photo attached showed a woman in her 30s, the same woman from the first image in that mysterious file. The report stated she had disappeared 2 days ago, last seen leaving work at night, walking to her car in an empty parking garage. Over the following weeks, more reports came in, more familiar faces, more disappearances, each victim matching an image from that vanished file, each one reported missing after I had viewed their photo. I became obsessed, tracking each case, looking for connections. The victims had nothing in common, different jobs, different neighborhoods, different lives. Nothing connected them except their appearance in that file and their subsequent disappearance. And every night I checked my laptop. I searched for that file, half hoping and half dreading that it might reappear. It never did, but sometimes when the room was dark and the only light came from my screen, I could swear I caught a glimpse of something reflected in the glass. A tall figure watching. Tonight I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know. Because today I received an email from an unknown sender. No subject line, no message, just an attachment, a single image. It shows me sitting at my desk looking at my computer screen. The angle is from behind over my shoulder. I'm looking at an image of myself. And behind me stands a figure, tall and indistinct, reaching toward me. The timestamp on the photo is tomorrow. I've checked my office, I've checked my home. I've looked over my shoulder 1,000 times. There's no one there, but I know now what connected all those people in the photos. They all saw something they weren't supposed to see. They all opened something labeled, "Do not open." And now so have I. The rain is tapping against my window again tonight, gentle, rhythmic, almost soothing. But between the raindrops, I keep hearing another sound. Something like footsteps coming slowly up the stairs, something like breathing just outside my door. Something like fingers gently testing the handle. Story 3, her apartment had a long hallway that never quite felt right. One night she followed it all the way to the end, and instead of a door there was now a solid wall, fresh paint, no seams. And in the middle of it, a single fingerprint pressed into the drywall. I've been investigating disappearances for 17 years now. You'd think the cases would blend together after a while, but some stand apart, lingering in your consciousness like a half-remembered dream. The Rebecca Thorne case is one of those, the kind that follows you home and sits beside you in your quiet moments. It was late October when I first walked into that apartment building on Maple Street. The air had that particular crispness that comes with fall, carrying the scent of decaying leaves and wood smoke. My footsteps echoed against the Art Deco tiles in the lobby, a rhythm that seemed to match the steady beat of rain against the windows. The building superintendent, a man named Ellis with perpetually ink-stained fingers and eyes that never quite met yours, unlocked apartment 718 with a large ring of jingling keys. "Haven't been in here since the report came in," he said, his voice barely audible above the antiquated radiator's hiss. "Everything's just as it was." The door swung open with a low creak, revealing a space suspended in time. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the coffee table, a thin film formed across its surface. Mail was stacked neatly on a small entry table, the topmost envelope dated 3 weeks prior. The apartment smelled of stale air and something else, something subtle that I couldn't quite place. "Ms. Thorne was reported missing by her employer," I said, more to fill the silence than to inform Ellis, who was already backing toward the door. "She hadn't shown up for work for 3 days. No calls, no emails." Ellis nodded, his eyes drifting to the hallway that extended from the living area. "That's where her roommate said she went," he murmured. "Down that hall, never came back out." The roommate, Vivian Carter, had given a statement that defied logic. According to her, Rebecca had gone to her bedroom at the end of the hall on a Tuesday evening and simply never returned. When Vivian checked the room the next morning, it was empty. Rebecca's bed was made, her phone was on the nightstand, her purse untouched. I thanked Ellis and closed the door behind him, listening to his footsteps fade down the corridor outside. Then I stood perfectly still, letting the apartment speak to me in its own language of subtle sounds and shadows. The living room was ordinary, a sofa with too many pillows, bookshelves lined with paperbacks, a television mounted on the wall. Nothing suggested struggle or forced entry. The kitchen was similarly undisturbed, dishes drying in the rack, a grocery list magnetized to the refrigerator in neat handwriting. And then there was the hallway. It stretched before me longer than it should have been for an apartment this size. The walls were painted a soft gray, illuminated by recessed lighting that created small pools of brightness with shadows between them. 4 doors lined the passage: bathroom, linen closet, Vivian's room, and at the very end, Rebecca's bedroom. Except there was no door at the end of the hallway. Where Rebecca's bedroom should have been, there was only a wall, smooth, freshly painted, with no sign that a door had ever existed there. I approached it slowly, my fingertips trailing along the wallpaper. The superintendent's keys jingled in my pocket, a discordant counterpoint to the quiet hum of the building's heating system. "This isn't possible," I whispered to myself, my voice sounding foreign in the stillness. I pulled out my phone and checked the building plans I'd downloaded earlier. According to the schematics, apartment 718 had 2 bedrooms, one on each side of the hall, with Rebecca's at the end. Yet here I stood before a blank wall where a door should be. As I moved closer, the overhead light caught something in the paint, a subtle depression in the otherwise smooth surface. A fingerprint pressed into still wet drywall compound. I photographed it carefully, the flash of my camera momentarily brightening the dim hallway. I called Vivian Carter that evening, and we met at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the apartment. She was in her late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving, adjusting her scarf, stirring her untouched tea, twisting a thin silver ring. "I know how it sounds," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know nobody believes me, but that's what happened. There was a door there, Rebecca's door. She went in Tuesday night around 11. I heard her close it. In the morning there was just wall." "Did you notice anything unusual about the apartment before this happened?" I asked, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Any strange noises, unusual visitors?" Vivian's eyes drifted to the window where pedestrians hurried past under umbrellas. "The hallway," she said after a long pause. "It always felt wrong somehow, too long. I'd mentioned it to Rebecca once, but she laughed it off, said it was just an optical illusion from the lighting." And Rebecca herself, had she been acting differently in the days before she disappeared? She'd been quiet, spending more time in her room. Vivian hesitated, then added, she'd been having dreams, bad ones. She said she kept dreaming about that hallway stretching on forever, leading her somewhere she didn't want to go. I left the cafe with more questions than answers, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Over the next week, I pieced together what I could about Rebecca Thorne. 32 years old, worked as an architectural preservationist, no romantic partner, close to her sister who lived in Seattle, no history of mental health issues or substance abuse, no enemies that anyone knew of. The fingerprint from the wall yielded no matches in any database. The building's security cameras showed Rebecca entering the apartment that Tuesday evening, but there was no footage of her leaving. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist once she walked through her front door. I interviewed the previous tenants of apartment 718. They described nothing unusual about the layout: 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a standard floor plan. When I showed them recent photos of the apartment, specifically the hallway ending in a wall, their confusion seemed genuine. "That's not right," said Martin Keller, who had lived there for 3 years before moving out 6 months ago. "Rebecca's room was right there at the end of the hall. I helped her move in some furniture when she and Vivian first took the place." 2 weeks into the investigation, I received permission to open up the wall. A contractor was brought in, and I watched as he carefully cut into the drywall where Rebecca's door should have been. Layer by layer, he removed sections of plaster and paint, revealing nothing. Just the building's original brick exterior, with no sign that an opening had ever existed. "This doesn't make any sense," the contractor said, running his hand over the brick. "According to the building plans, there should be a room here." I stood in that hallway for a long time after he left, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew to be true. The building plans, the previous tenants' testimonies, Vivian's account, all indicated that Rebecca's bedroom should exist. Yet here was solid brick, undisturbed for what looked like decades. That night I dreamed of walking down that hallway myself, the path stretching and contracting with each step I took, the end always just out of reach. I woke up gasping, my sheets damp with sweat. The next day I interviewed the building's architect, an elderly man named James Harmon, who had designed several buildings in the area during the 1960s. He studied the original blueprints with a magnifying glass, his brow furrowed. "This building has always had an unusual energy flow," he said eventually, his finger tracing the hallway of apartment 718. "I designed it according to certain principles that were unconventional. The previous owner had specific requests." "What kind of requests?" I asked, my pen hovering over my notebook. Harmon's eyes met mine for the first time. He believed in thresholds, spaces that could exist between other spaces, transitions that weren't just physical. I left his office more confused than when I'd arrived, but something he'd said stuck with me. That evening I returned to the apartment, determined to spend the night there. I brought a sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee, and my case files. As darkness fell, I positioned myself in the living room, facing the hallway. The hours passed slowly. The building settled around me with creaks and sighs. Occasionally, I'd hear footsteps from the apartment above or muffled conversation from next door. Around 2 in the morning, when the world outside had gone completely quiet, I noticed something about the hallway. It seemed to be breathing. The sensation was subtle, a gentle expansion and contraction of the space, as if the walls were moving imperceptibly. I stared until my eyes watered, convinced I was imagining it. But there it was, the hallway lengthening slightly before returning to its original dimensions. I got up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest, and began walking toward Rebecca's non-existent room. The closer I got to the end of the hallway, the stronger the sensation became, not just visual now, but physical, as if the air itself was thickening around me. 5 feet from the wall, I stopped. There in the dim light, I could see that the fingerprint I'd noticed before wasn't alone. There were others now, faint impressions in the paint, as if someone had pressed their fingers against the wall from the other side. I reached out my own hand, hesitating just inches from the surface. The air felt electric, charged with a potential I couldn't name. Slowly, I pressed my palm against the wall. It was cool to the touch and solid, yet there was a giving quality to it, like pressing against a membrane rather than brick and plaster. For a brief moment, I felt something push back, a pressure against my hand that seemed to match my own. I yanked my hand away as if burned, stumbling backward into the opposite wall. My heart was racing now, my breath coming in short gasps. I fumbled for my phone and took several photos of the wall, the flash illuminating new fingerprints that hadn't been visible before. The Rebecca Thorne case remains open. She's still listed as a missing person, her disappearance unexplained. Vivian Carter moved out of apartment 718 shortly after my investigation began, and the unit has remained vacant since then. The management company has had trouble renting it, despite lowering the price significantly. I visit the apartment every few months, standing in that hallway, looking at the wall that shouldn't be there. Sometimes I bring new equipment, thermal cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, hoping to capture something that will make sense of what happened. So far, nothing has. But each time I visit, there are new fingerprints on the wall. Sometimes in the quiet hours of early morning when sleep evades me, I wonder about Rebecca Thorne. I wonder if she's trapped somewhere in a space between spaces, a threshold that was crossed but never uncrossed. I wonder if she's trying to get back, pressing against a barrier that only appears solid from our side. And I wonder, with a chill that never quite leaves me, if that hallway is still stretching for her, leading her further and further away from the world she knew, into a darkness that has no end. Story 4, The Scent Hit Me First. That peculiar mixture of age and preservation, musty paper, old wood, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something metallic. The floorboards beneath my feet creaked with each step as I moved deeper into the guest room of my newly inherited home, a Victorian-style house on the outskirts of Millfield that had belonged to my Aunt Evelyn, an aunt I'd never met. The large wooden trunk dominated the far corner of the room, its dark mahogany surface dulled by decades of dust and neglect. What struck me as odd wasn't its size or antiquated brass fittings, but the fact that it had been bolted to the floor. 4 heavy metal brackets secured it to the hardwood, as if someone feared it might try to escape. The lawyer didn't mention anything about this, I whispered to myself, my voice unnaturally loud in the empty house. I ran my fingers along the trunk's curved lid, leaving trails in the dust. A heavy brass padlock secured the latch, old but sturdy. The key was nowhere to be found among the collection I'd received from the estate attorney. According to him, Aunt Evelyn had lived alone for 30 years before passing in her sleep last winter. No children, no visitors, just a reclusive widow who'd remembered a niece she'd never bothered to meet. Rain began to tap against the windows, gentle at first, then growing steadier. The gray afternoon light cast long shadows across the room, making the trunk seem larger than it was, more imposing. I found myself circling it slowly, studying the craftsmanship, the worn leather straps reinforcing the corners, the intricate pattern carved into its sides, vines and flowers, I thought at first, until I looked closer and realized they were thorns. I should have waited, should have called a locksmith in the morning, but something about that trunk pulled at my curiosity, a weight beyond its physical presence. The house was mine now, after all. Everything in it belonged to me. In the basement, I found a toolbox with a crowbar and hammer. The metal felt cool in my palms as I carried them back upstairs, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. Thunder rumbled in the distance as I positioned the crowbar's edge beneath the padlock's hasp. The lock put up more resistance than I'd expected. Sweat beaded on my forehead as I applied pressure, feeling the old metal gradually bend beneath my effort. When it finally gave way, the snap was sudden and final, sending me stumbling backward. The padlock clattered to the floor, leaving the trunk's latch exposed. I hesitated then, one hand resting on the lid. The rain had intensified, drumming against the roof in a steady rhythm that seemed to match my heartbeat. Something about this moment felt significant, a boundary I was about to cross. "This is ridiculous," I told myself. "It's just an old trunk." The hinges protested with a long, mournful creak as I lifted the heavy lid. A waft of preserved air escaped, stale, confined with that same metallic undercurrent I'd noticed before. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness inside, I made out the careful folds of white fabric. A wedding dress, yellowed with age but still beautiful with its intricate lace and pearl beading. Victorian or Edwardian, I guessed, though I was no expert. But as I lifted it from the trunk, I realized the fabric wasn't merely yellowed. Large portions were stained a deep rusty brown, the discoloration most concentrated around the bodice. The stains had set decades ago, leaving the once white fabric permanently marked. I didn't need forensic training to recognize what I was looking at. Dried blood, a considerable amount of it. Beneath where the dress had lain was a small shoebox. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, I found a cassette tape labeled in neat, feminine handwriting, "Play when she returns." The house suddenly felt colder. I was alone, or at least I had been certain I was alone until that moment. Now, standing in the fading light with a blood-stained wedding dress in my hands and a mysterious tape with an impossible instruction, I wasn't so sure anymore. In the master bedroom, I found an old tape player on the nightstand. It looked well used but maintained, as if it had been regularly dusted and cared for. I placed the cassette inside and pressed play, half expecting nothing but static after all these years. Instead, I heard my aunt's voice for the first time. "Hello, Rebecca," a pause, a soft intake of breath. "If you're listening to this, then you've found the trunk, and if you've found the trunk, you've seen the dress." My hands trembled. How did she know my name? How could she have known I would be the one to inherit her house? "I need to tell you about Marion," my aunt's voice continued, steady and clear. "She was my sister. Your mother never spoke of her, I imagine. The family didn't speak of her, not after what happened." I sank onto the bed, the wedding dress still draped across my lap, its stains pressing against my jeans. Outside, lightning illuminated the yard for a brief moment, creating strange, dancing shadows on the walls. Marion was to be married in the summer of 1967. Her fiancé, Thomas Blackwood, was from one of the wealthiest families in the county. Handsome, charming, and, as we would discover too late, violently possessive. The tape hissed softly during another pause. 3 days before the wedding, Marion tried to call it off. She discovered something about Thomas, something she wouldn't tell even me. She only said he wasn't who he pretended to be. That night, she disappeared. The police found her car abandoned near Widow's Creek, but no sign of Marion. I found myself staring at the bedroom door, suddenly aware of every creak and settle of the old house around me. Thomas appeared devastated. He joined the search parties. He wept at the memorial service. He became a pillar of the community, the grieving almost husband who never married. Eventually, he became mayor, then state senator. He died last year, celebrated as a great man. Another pause, longer this time. When my aunt spoke again, her voice had hardened. "I knew Rebecca, I always knew, but I could never prove it. The night Marion disappeared, Thomas came to this house. He was covered in mud, agitated. He asked to use our bathroom to clean up before going to the police station. I saw him carrying something wrapped in a tarp to his car. I was only 16, too afraid to say anything then. By the time I found the courage, no one would listen. Thomas was too powerful, too respected. My eyes drifted to the blood-stained wedding dress. I found the dress a week later, hidden in that trunk in the room where you're staying. It was locked then, too. I kept it all these years, waiting for someone who would believe me, waiting for the right time. Now Thomas is gone, but the truth remains. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter. The house felt impossibly quiet as my aunt's final words played through the small speaker. There's a garden shed behind the house. The concrete floor was poured in the week after Marion vanished. Thomas did the work himself, a kindness to my grieving parents, he said. Look beneath it, Rebecca. Find her. Give my sister peace. The tape clicked off. I sat motionless, the blood-stained dress heavy on my lap, my aunt's words hanging in the stillness. Through the window, I could see the small garden shed at the edge of the overgrown backyard, its weathered door swinging gently in the night breeze. In the morning, I would call the police. I would tell them everything. But for now, in the gathering darkness, I felt strangely calm, as if Marion and Evelyn had been waiting all these years for someone to finally listen, for someone to uncover what had been buried for so long. Outside, the garden shed door creaked in the wind, waiting for me, waiting for dawn. Story 5, I remember the day I found it with perfect clarity, the kind of memory that settles into your bones and stays there, unchanging, even as years pass by. It was a Thursday afternoon in October, the kind where autumn hangs suspended between golden warmth and the first whispers of winter. The thrift store on Maple Street had become my weekly ritual, a small indulgence I allowed myself between case files and witness statements. The notebook called to me from the bottom shelf of a forgotten bookcase, wedged between water-damaged paperbacks and outdated travel guides. Leather-bound, the color of aged bourbon, with a thin layer of dust that suggested it had been waiting there for some time. I ran my finger along its spine, leaving a clean trail through the years of neglect. Something about its presence felt intentional, as if it had been placed there specifically for me to find. 22 years as a detective had taught me that coincidences rarely exist, but I wasn't on duty that day. I was just Elizabeth Gray, private citizen, who had handed over $35.17 for a collection of second-hand treasures, including the notebook that now sat heavy in my canvas tote bag. The evening wrapped around my small apartment like a familiar blanket as I settled into my reading chair, the one by the window where streetlight filtered through half-drawn blinds. A glass of Cabernet breathed on the side table. The distant hum of traffic formed a white noise backdrop as I finally opened the notebook, expecting someone's abandoned journal or perhaps a student's forgotten notes. The first page nearly caused me to drop my wine. The handwriting was unmistakably mine, not similar, not reminiscent of, but exactly mine, down to the way I cross my T's with a slightly longer line than necessary and the distinctive curve of my lowercase g's. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat as I read the first entry. April 15, 2023. I keep seeing the same car parked outside my building, dark sedan, tinted windows, license plate partially obscured. Could be nothing, could be something. Need to start documenting these occurrences. But I had never written these words. I own no journal. And yet, here was my handwriting, my rhythms of thought, even the way I tend to fragment sentences when taking notes to myself. I turned the page with fingers that had gone cold despite the warmth of my apartment. April 17, 2023. Someone has been in my apartment, nothing obvious taken, but things are slightly moved. The coffee mug I always leave by the sink was in the cabinet. The throw blanket was folded differently. Small things no one would notice, except I notice. My eyes darted to my own throw blanket, draped across the arm of my sofa in the precise way I always leave it. A shiver ran along my spine, raising the fine hairs on my arms. I took a slow sip of wine, forcing myself to breathe evenly. There had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps this was some elaborate prank from my colleagues at the precinct, or maybe. April 23, 2023. I'm not sleeping well, keep waking at 3:17 a.m. exactly, every night. The digital clock glows in the darkness like an accusation. Something about that time feels significant, but I can't place why. Checked case files for any crimes occurring at that time. Nothing stands out. I glanced at my bedside clock visible through the bedroom doorway. It was 9:42 p.m., hours away from 3:17 a.m. Yet I knew, with the certainty that comes from years of intuition hardened into evidence, that I would be awake at exactly that time tonight. The pages continued, each entry more disturbing than the last. They detailed surveillance patterns I had apparently noticed but had no memory of documenting. They mentioned colleagues by name, people I worked with every day, and cast subtle suspicions on their behaviors. According to this journal I had never kept, I was investigating something off the books, something I told no one about. May 12, 2023. The photograph was moved again, half an inch to the left, same as Tuesday. It's the only photo I keep of David. Someone is sending a message about him, about what happened, they know. My ex-husband David, who had left 5 years ago under circumstances I preferred not to dwell on. The photograph mentioned sat on my bookshelf exactly where it always did. I rose from my chair and crossed the room to examine it. The dust around its base was undisturbed, yet something compelled me to lift it, to check beneath its frame. A small piece of paper, folded twice. I didn't need to open it to know what it would say. The journal had already told me. The key is in the storage unit, box 317. I had no storage unit. At least, I didn't think I did. As I continued reading, the entries became more fragmented, more paranoid. My handwriting grew slightly more erratic, though still unmistakably mine. The journal detailed an investigation into what appeared to be a conspiracy involving evidence tampering in a case I had closed 2 years ago. The Chambers case. A suicide that never sat right with me, but which the department had pressured me to wrap up quickly. Alina Chambers, found hanging in her apartment with a typed note. No fingerprints, no signs of struggle. A woman with no history of depression and every reason to live. I had suspected murder from the beginning, but the political pressure had been intense. Her father was connected to people who could make problems disappear or create them for detective who asked too many questions. The journal suggested I had never stopped investigating, that I had uncovered connections between Alina's death and 3 other supposed suicides across the state. All women in their early 30s, all with similar physical characteristics, all with promising careers and no history of mental health issues. June 3, 2023. Someone followed me to Alina's mother's house today, kept their distance, but I spotted the sedan 3 times on different streets. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. They want me to know I'm being watched. I had spoken to Alina's mother exactly once at the funeral, or so I thought. According to this journal, I had visited her multiple times, gathering information the official investigation had missed. The entries continued chronologically, detailing an investigation I had no memory of conducting. Names of witnesses I had supposedly interviewed. locations of evidence I had apparently collected and hidden. It was all so detailed, so specific, written in a voice that was undeniably mine. Then I reached the final page. Unlike the others, this one contained only a single line, written in slightly darker ink, pressed more firmly into the paper. "You stop reading here, or he'll know." My phone rang, shattering the silence. The number displayed was from within my own precinct. Without thinking, I answered. "Detective Gray." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Elizabeth, it was Captain Mercer. Sorry to bother you off hours, but something's come up with the Chambers case. Some new evidence has surfaced. I need you to come in." The Chambers case closed 2 years ago, just like the journal said would happen. "What kind of evidence?" I asked, my eyes fixed on the warning on the final page. "Better discussed in person. There's a storage unit involved, some personal effects of the victim we didn't catalog properly. Unit 317. I've sent a car for you. Should be outside your building now." Unit 317. The exact number mentioned in the note under David's photograph. "I'll be right down," I said, ending the call. I stood in my apartment, the journal still open on my lap, the warning staring up at me. Outside, I heard a car door slam. Through the gap in my blinds, I could make out a dark sedan with tinted windows idling by the curb. The journal had predicted everything, but how? Was I losing my mind, or was something far more sinister at play? I had a choice to make. Go downstairs and get into the car that Captain Mercer had supposedly sent, or grab my service weapon from the lockbox in my bedroom and find storage unit 317 on my own terms. The answer seemed obvious, too obvious, like someone was laying out a path they expected me to take. I looked once more at the final warning in the journal. "You stop reading here, or he'll know." But there were no more pages to read, unless... I turned the notebook over, examining its binding with the trained eye of someone who has spent decades looking for what others miss. The stitching at the very back seemed slightly different, tighter, newer. I worked my fingernail along the leather interior until I felt it give way, revealing a hidden pocket. Inside was a single photograph, me sleeping in my own bed, dated last night. On the back, written in my handwriting, "By the time you find this, you'll already be too late, but try anyway. Storage 317. Bring your gun. Trust no one at the precinct, especially not Mercer." The car horn outside sounded twice, patient, waiting, knowing I would eventually come down. I moved to my lockbox and entered the combination, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. If I couldn't trust my own memories, what could I trust? The notebook, the investigation I apparently conducted but couldn't remember, the warning about Mercer, and most disturbing of all, the photograph of me sleeping in my own bed, taken without my knowledge. As I loaded my service weapon, I glanced once more at the journal on my reading chair. Whatever truth awaited me at storage unit 317, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Either my mind was fracturing in ways I couldn't comprehend, or someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make me doubt my own reality. The car horn sounded again, 3 times now, more insistent. I slipped the photograph into my pocket and my weapon into its holster. Whatever game was being played, I was done being a pawn. The only question that remained as I headed for the door was chilling in its simplicity. If I couldn't trust my own handwriting, my own memories, or my own colleagues, who exactly was I about to become? Story 6. Her bedroom window overlooked the backyard until one day it didn't. The view had changed to a row of unfamiliar houses. In the closest window, someone was staring back. When she tried to take a picture, her phone only captured her empty room. I remember the precise moment I first heard about the Emerson case. It was early November, the kind of autumn evening where darkness falls too soon and the air carries a chill that settles deep in your bones. The station was quiet except for the distant hum of the heating system and the occasional shuffling of papers. My coffee had grown cold in the ceramic mug beside my notepad, forgotten during the hours I had spent reviewing case files from the previous week. Detective Collins approached my desk with that particular walk he had, deliberate, measured steps that never seemed hurried yet always conveyed urgency. He placed a thin manila folder in front of me, its edges crisp and unmarked. New case. "This one's different," he said, his voice low and even. "Thought you might want to take a look." I didn't open the folder immediately. Instead, I watched as Collins retreated to his desk across the room, settling into his chair with a soft creak that echoed in the near-empty office. My fingers traced the edge of the folder, feeling the smooth paper beneath my fingertips. In my 15 years with the department, I had developed a strange ritual of pausing before diving into a new case, a moment to prepare myself for whatever darkness awaited inside. When I finally opened it, I found a statement from Rebecca Emerson, age 32, elementary school teacher. Single, no history of mental illness, no prior police reports, nothing remarkable except for what she claimed had happened in her bedroom on October 12th. According to her statement, Rebecca had lived in her small two-bedroom Craftsman on Maple Street for nearly 4 years. Her bedroom was situated at the back of the house, with a modest window that overlooked a fenced backyard, a small garden shed, and beyond that, a line of tall pine trees marking the edge of a nature preserve. She described this view in specific detail: the bird feeder she had installed near the old oak tree, the stone path leading to the garden shed, the way morning light filtered through the pines. Then, on the morning of October 12th, she woke to find the view had changed. I paused in my reading, reaching for my cold coffee more out of habit than desire. Rebecca Emerson claimed that when she pulled back her curtains that morning, she no longer saw her backyard. Instead, she saw a row of unfamiliar houses, Victorian-style homes with narrow facades and steep roofs, painted in subdued colors. Houses that, according to city records and satellite imagery, did not exist. More disturbing was what she saw in the window of the closest house, a figure motionless, staring directly at her, not waving, not acknowledging her presence in any way, just watching. Rebecca's statement continued, describing how she had reached for her phone to document this impossibility. Yet when she reviewed the photo she had taken, it showed only her empty bedroom reflected in the glass, as though the window were a mirror rather than a portal to the outside world. I set the folder down and leaned back in my chair, listening to the soft tick of the wall clock. Cases like this usually resolved quickly. Hallucinations from carbon monoxide exposure, medication side effects, or sometimes psychological breaks resulting from stress. But something about the precision of Rebecca's account, the clinical way she documented the inconsistency, it felt different. The next morning I drove to Maple Street. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, and unremarkable. Rebecca's house sat midway down the block, its blue paint faded but well-maintained, a small porch with a wooden swing facing the street. Nothing about it suggested anything unusual. She answered the door on my second knock, her appearance matching the driver's license photo in the file, brown hair pulled back, eyes tired but alert. She invited me in without hesitation, leading me through a living room decorated with framed landscape photographs and well-worn furniture. "Would you like coffee?" she asked, her voice steady but soft, as though we were in a library rather than her home. I declined politely and she nodded, gesturing toward a hallway. "I'll show you the window." Her bedroom was neat and minimalist, a queen bed with a gray comforter, a small wooden dresser, a bookshelf filled with paperbacks arranged by color. The window in question was ordinary, white frame, double-hung, approximately 3 feet wide and 4 feet tall. And beyond it, exactly as Rebecca had described in her statement, was her backyard, the garden shed, the bird feeder, the line of pine trees in the distance. "It's back to normal now," she said, standing a careful distance from the glass. "It's been normal for 3 days." I approached the window, examining the frame, the lock, the glass itself. "Tell me about that morning again," I prompted, keeping my voice neutral, unhurried. Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself, not in a defensive gesture, but as if preserving warmth. "I've had the same morning routine for years. Wake up at 5:45, make coffee, grade papers or prepare lessons for an hour, then shower, dress, and leave for school by 7:30. She paused, her gaze fixed on the window. That morning was no different, except when I opened the curtains while my coffee was brewing. She described again what she had seen, the row of houses, the watching figure. She showed me her phone, scrolling to the photo she had taken, a dim image showing only her room reflected in darkness, as though the window were photographed at night rather than morning. "I didn't imagine it," she said, her voice gaining a subtle edge for the first time. "I know how it sounds, but I didn't imagine it." I nodded, continuing my examination of the window. No signs of tampering, no unusual gaps or cracks, nothing to suggest any explanation for what she claimed to have seen. Over the next week, I conducted a thorough investigation. I interviewed neighbors, none of whom reported anything unusual on or around October 12th. I reviewed city planning records, confirming there had never been Victorian homes in the vicinity. I even consulted with a glass specialist who examined the window and found it to be a standard installation from when the house was built in 1998. Rebecca returned to her teaching position, maintaining her routine. No further incidents occurred. The case file remained open but inactive, one of those unexplained events that occasionally punctuate the otherwise methodical work of law enforcement. And then 3 weeks later, I received a call from Rebecca at 6:12 a.m. "It's happening again," she said, her voice a controlled whisper, "but it's different this time." I drove to her house immediately, arriving as the first pale light of dawn was breaking over the neighborhood. Rebecca met me at the door, fully dressed but with an untouched mug of coffee in her hand. "It's still there," she said, and this time he moved. In her bedroom, I approached the window cautiously. The view had indeed changed. Gone was the backyard with its garden shed and bird feeder. Instead, there stood the row of Victorian houses exactly as she had described them, and in the window of the nearest house, a figure stood watching. As I stared, trying to process what I was seeing, the figure raised one hand slowly and pressed it against their window, as if reaching out across the impossible space between us. I removed my phone from my pocket, opened the camera app, and captured an image. When I looked at the screen, I saw only Rebecca's empty room reflected in darkness, despite the morning light that should have been visible. "Do you believe me now?" Rebecca asked, her voice soft behind me. I turned to answer her, but found myself alone in the room. Confused, I called out her name, receiving no response. I moved quickly through the house, checking each room, finding no trace of her. When I returned to the bedroom, the window once again showed the normal backyard view. Rebecca Emerson was never found. Her disappearance case remains open, classified as a missing person with unusual circumstances. The house on Maple Street was eventually sold to a new family who have reported no issues with the bedroom window. Sometimes on particularly quiet evenings at the station, I open the Emerson file and review the notes, the interviews, the photographs that show nothing unusual. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my own home, I find myself hesitating before opening the curtains in the morning, wondering if the view beyond my window is truly the one that should be there, and what might be looking back at me from a place that doesn't exist. I never took that final photograph of Rebecca's window with me. Department policy required all case documentation to remain in the file, but I remember what I saw when I reviewed it later that day. Not an empty room reflected in darkness, but a faint outline of what appeared to be Rebecca Emerson, standing in a Victorian-style bedroom, looking out through a window at me. Story 7. I've been an investigator in this small coastal town for 15 years now, but some cases still manage to creep under my skin long after the files are closed. The Jensen case is one of those, the kind that follows you home at night and lingers in the space between wakefulness and sleep. It began, as these things often do, with something seemingly innocent, a plate of cookies. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when Sarah Jensen first called the station. The autumn air had turned crisp, and the streets were littered with fallen leaves that crunched beneath my shoes as I approached her front door. The porch light cast a soft yellow glow over the welcome mat as she opened the door, her face drawn with concern rather than fear. Not yet, anyway. "Thank you for coming," she said, leading me into a kitchen that smelled of cinnamon and sugar. "I know it sounds silly, but something isn't right." On the counter sat a ceramic plate stacked with perfectly round chocolate chip cookies, still slightly warm. Beside it, a folded note written in flowing cursive, "Thanks for letting me watch them again." Sarah's voice was steady but quiet as she explained that she had never hired a babysitter named Abby. Her children, Ethan, age 7, and Lily, age 5, were upstairs sleeping now. They had spoken casually over dinner about playing games with Miss Abby while Sarah was at work that afternoon. When questioned, the children described a woman with sunshine hair who read them stories and taught them a new clapping game. "I thought maybe it was a mix-up," Sarah said, her fingers tracing the edge of the note. "That she was supposed to be at another house, but the cookies, they were still warm when I got home, and the note." I examined the kitchen carefully. No signs of forced entry. The back door's lock was intact. I asked to see the children's rooms where they slept peacefully, unaware of their mother's growing unease. Nothing seemed disturbed or out of place, yet everything felt wrong. The security system hadn't registered any unusual activity. The neighbors hadn't noticed anyone entering or leaving the Jensen home. It was as if this Miss Abby had materialized inside the house, spent the afternoon with the children, and then vanished without a trace. I collected the note for fingerprint analysis and asked Sarah to keep the cookies for potential testing. As I prepared to leave, Sarah's hand caught my arm. "Detective," she whispered, "the most unsettling part is that when I asked Ethan how long Miss Abby has been coming over, he said, 'Oh, lots of times. She watches us sleep sometimes too.'" Sleep did not come easily that night. The lab results came back the next morning. The note had no usable fingerprints, almost as if it had been wiped clean. The cookie analysis would take longer. I spent the day reviewing neighborhood security footage and interviewing nearby residents, but no one recalled seeing a blonde woman entering the Jensen property. 2 days later, Sarah called again, her voice noticeably shakier than before. I drove through a fine mist of rain to her house, where the porch light flickered intermittently, casting dancing shadows across the front yard. "She left something in Lily's room," Sarah said, leading me upstairs. On Lily's pink pillow lay a small handmade doll with button eyes and yellow yarn hair. Next to it, another note, "She reminds me of me." The children remained oblivious to any danger, describing Miss Abby with the innocent enthusiasm reserved for favorite teachers or beloved aunts. According to them, she told wonderful stories, knew all their favorite games, and always smelled like vanilla and something flowery. I established a patrol car to drive by the Jensen house every hour. We installed additional security cameras. I advised Sarah to consider staying with relatives, but she was reluctant to disrupt the children's routine without concrete evidence of danger. The following week passed without incident. The patrol officers reported nothing unusual. The security cameras captured only the expected comings and goings of the family and occasional delivery personnel. Just as we began to wonder if our mysterious visitor had moved on, she made her presence known once more. It was Sunday morning when Sarah discovered a family photo had been altered. The original picture showed Sarah with her 2 children at the beach last summer. Now, standing beside them in the photo was a slender blonde woman, her arm casually draped over Lily's shoulders. The image wasn't crudely edited. It appeared as if she had always been there, smiling alongside the family, her features slightly blurred but distinctly present. "This isn't possible," Sarah whispered, her hands trembling as she held the framed photograph. "This picture was taken months ago. She wasn't there." The lab confirmed what we already suspected. The photo had been expertly manipulated, but how had it been done? When had someone gained access to replace the original in its frame? The security footage showed no one entering the house. I interviewed the children again, this time with a child psychologist present. They maintained their story about Miss Abby with unwavering consistency. Dr. Mayers, the psychologist, noted that the children showed no signs of fear or trauma. If anything, they seemed fond of their mysterious visitor. "Lily says Miss Abby told her that she used to live in our house," Sarah revealed later that evening as we sat at her kitchen table reviewing the case. "But we've only been here 3 years, and I checked the property records going back 15 years. There's never been anyone named Abby or Abigail associated with this address." The case took a disturbing turn the following morning. Sarah called me at dawn, her voice barely audible through stifled sobs. "She was here in my room." I arrived to find Sarah sitting on her front steps, the children still asleep inside. She hadn't wanted to wake them, hadn't wanted them to see her fear. "I woke up and she was standing by my bed," Sarah whispered, "just watching me. When I gasped, she smiled and said, 'They're such beautiful children. I've always wanted a family like yours.' Then she just walked out the door. I was too terrified to follow." The security cameras had captured nothing. The motion sensors hadn't triggered. It was as if this woman existed in some parallel dimension that overlapped with ours only when she chose. We moved the Jensen family to a hotel while forensic experts combed through the house. They found nothing conclusive, just a faint trace of perfume in Sarah's bedroom that matched the vanilla and lavender scent the children had described. 3 days into their hotel stay, The front desk called Sarah's room to inform her that her sister had left something for the children at reception. Sarah had no sister. By the time I arrived, the desk clerk could only describe a pleasant blonde woman who had dropped off a small gift bag containing 2 hand-knitted scarves and a note to keep you warm until you come home. The hotel's security footage showed a woman entering the lobby, but her face was always angled away from the cameras, as if she instinctively knew their positions. It was through old newspaper archives that we finally found her. Abigail Winters, aged 28, had died in a house fire 17 years earlier, in the very same house where the Jensens now lived. She had been a kindergarten teacher, beloved by her students. Photographs showed a slender woman with blonde hair and a warm smile. According to the articles, Abigail had dreams of starting a family of her own someday. The case remains officially unsolved. The Jensen family has since moved to another state, their house standing empty for months before new owners finally moved in. Sometimes I drive by that house in the evenings, watching the lights come on as dusk settles over the neighborhood. I wonder if the new family has met Miss Abby yet, if they've found unexpected cookies cooling on their kitchen counter. I've been an investigator long enough to know that some things defy explanation. But on quiet nights, when the wind whispers through the trees outside my window, I still find myself thinking about those perfectly round chocolate chip cookies and a woman who loved children so much that not even death could keep her from them. Story 8, I remember the first time Alina mentioned the key. A Tuesday evening in late October, the kind where autumn's chill seeps through window panes like an unwelcome visitor. The low hum of the recorder between us captured her trembling voice as she described finding it. It was just there in my mailbox. Alina's fingers traced the tarnished brass outline on the table, an antique skeleton key with a small paper tag that simply read home. I've investigated unusual cases before, but something in her measured tone made me lean forward slightly. 23 years with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department had taught me patience. The truly disturbing stories reveal themselves gradually, like photographs developing in darkroom chemicals. At first I thought it was a mistake, she continued, her gaze fixed on some middle distance beyond my office wall. That the mail carrier had mixed up addresses, or perhaps a previous tenant had ordered it, but no one else had lived in that house for over 30 years besides my grandmother, and then me. The ceiling fan above us turned lazily, casting slow-moving shadows across her face. Our small town rarely saw criminal activity beyond occasional petty theft or teenage vandalism. Yet here was Alina Matheson, the local librarian for nearly 15 years, sitting across from me with hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting with the edge of her cardigan. I tried it on every lock in my house, every door, cabinet, old trunk in the attic. Nothing. The methodical way she described her search reminded me of my own approach to cases, thorough, deliberate, leaving no possibility unexplored. I even called a locksmith. He said it was at least 100 years old, probably from the Victorian era. 3 days passed after our first meeting. I made notes, filed an initial report more out of procedure than necessity. What crime was there to investigate? A mysterious key delivered to a woman living alone in her grandmother's old Victorian home just outside town limits. Curious, perhaps, but hardly criminal. Then Alina called again. Her voice on the phone carried the same controlled precision I'd noticed during our interview, but underneath ran a current of something I couldn't quite name. Detective Morris, I found where it fits. The drive to her house that evening took 12 minutes. I remember counting each one, watching the landscape transition from storefronts to scattered farmhouses to the densely wooded area where Aliner's grandmother's Victorian stood partially obscured by ancient oak trees. The structure loomed 3 stories high, its gabled roof and ornate trim work visible even in the fading twilight. It was behind the pantry, she explained, leading me through a kitchen that smelled faintly of chamomile tea and lemon furniture polish. I was reorganizing the shelves, moved the flour canisters, and noticed a seam in the wallpaper. The pantry itself was a narrow room adjacent to the kitchen, lined with wooden shelves stacked with orderly rows of preserves, dry goods, and kitchen supplies. Aliner had already moved several items aside, revealing what at first appeared to be simply a section of wall. But as I stepped closer, I could make out the nearly imperceptible outline of a door, its edges concealed by wallpaper patterns and years of paint. I might never have found it if I hadn't been looking specifically. Her voice maintained that unsettling steadiness. The key fits perfectly. The lock turned with a mechanism so smooth it seemed to have been recently oiled, despite its apparent age. The door, no more than 4 feet high, swung inward without a sound. Aliner handed me a flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness beyond the threshold. What I saw made no architectural sense. Behind that door should have been the exterior wall of the house, perhaps at most a small maintenance space. Instead, a narrow staircase descended into what appeared to be a finished room. Wood paneling lined the walls, and the air carried a peculiar staleness, not the musty scent of an abandoned space, but rather the stillness of a room that has been carefully preserved. "I haven't gone down yet," Aliner whispered. "I wanted someone else to see it first." Professional instinct made me go first, each step on the narrow staircase creaking softly beneath my weight. 14 steps down, the flashlight beam revealed a fully furnished nursery. A crib stood in one corner, its white paint pristine. A rocking chair faced a window that couldn't possibly exist, given the location of this room within the house's architecture. Yet there it was, curtained with faded yellow fabric that stirred slightly in an impossible breeze. "This can't be here," I murmured, more to myself than to Aliner, who had followed me down. "The exterior wall of your house is right above us." "Look at the toys," she said, her voice suddenly small. Arranged on a small bookshelf were vintage toys, a teddy bear with one glass eye, wooden blocks with faded letters, a porcelain doll in a blue dress. Aliner moved toward them with recognition dawning on her face. "These are mine from when I was a child." Her fingers hovered over the doll without touching it. "This was my favorite. I called her Adelaide, but these were all packed away in the attic after my grandmother died. I haven't seen them in 20 years. I swept the flashlight across the room again, taking in details with methodical precision. A baby blanket draped over the crib rail, a changing table with neatly folded cloths, a mobile hanging motionless above the crib, small carved birds suspended as if frozen mid-flight. "Aliner, when was this house built?" 1887, my great-great-grandfather built it. "And your grandmother raised you here?" She nodded, her attention still fixed on the toys. "After my parents died, car accident when I was 3. The room held no dust, no cobwebs in corners, no signs of aging or neglect that would be expected in a space sealed away for decades. It was as if someone had prepared it yesterday, expecting a child to be placed in that crib by nightfall." "Did your grandmother ever mention another room, any renovation work?" Aliner's response was interrupted by a sound from above, the unmistakable click of the pantry door closing. both our heads turned toward the staircase. The beam of my flashlight illuminated empty steps leading up to what was now solid darkness. "Stay here," I instructed, moving quickly toward the stairs, but reaching the top, I found the small door firmly shut. The key Alina had shown me, the key that had opened this impossible room, now protruded from the lock on the inside, where neither of us had placed it. When I turned back, Alina stood beside the crib, her posture suddenly transformed. She ran her hand along the railing with familiar ease. "My grandmother used to come down here every night," she said, in a voice that sounded somehow younger. "I would hear her from my bedroom, the creak of those stairs, the sound of her rocking in that chair. She would sing. Alina, you never told me about this room before." I didn't remember until now. Her hand reached into the crib, adjusting a blanket that didn't need adjusting. This was where she kept the other one. The other one. Alina turned to me with eyes that reflected the flashlight beam strangely, like an animal's caught in headlights. "My sister, the one who didn't survive the accident. Grandmother said she needed a place to sleep too." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My years of training fought against the unease settling into my bones. There was a rational explanation. There had to be. "Let's go back upstairs," I suggested, keeping my voice measured. "We can call a contractor tomorrow, figure out how this space fits into the house's structure." Alina nodded but made no move toward the stairs. "The door won't open again tonight. That's not how it works." "What do you mean?" "It only opens when someone needs to be put to bed." Her hand moved to her stomach in a protective gesture I hadn't noticed before. "I'm pregnant, detective. 5 months now. I hadn't told anyone yet." The flashlight beam wavered as my hand trembled slightly. "Alina, we need to leave this room." My grandmother prepared it. Her tone had become dreamy, distant, for whichever child needed it, the living or the dead. I tried the door repeatedly that night, but Alina was right, it wouldn't budge. We spent hours in that impossible nursery, my radio unable to get any signal through what should have been just a few inches of house wall. When morning came, the door swung open on its own, sunlight from the pantry spilling down the stairs. Alina moved away 3 weeks later. The house stands empty now. Sometimes I drive by, looking up at windows that reflect nothing but sky and trees. The key sits in an evidence locker at the station, labeled as item 47B in what the department officially calls an unresolved trespassing case. I've never mentioned the room in any official report. Who would believe that an entire nursery could exist in a space that architectural plans say shouldn't be there? That toys packed away in an attic could appear, arranged as if by an invisible hand. That a room could know, somehow, what a woman hadn't yet told anyone. The locksmith who examined the key later couldn't identify its make or origin. "This isn't just old," he'd said, turning it over in his palm. "It's like it was never manufactured at all." Alina's child was born in spring. I haven't seen either of them. Sometimes when I drive past that empty house, I imagine I can see a light glowing from somewhere beneath the foundation, in a room that waits behind a door that shouldn't exist. And I wonder who or what rocks in that chair on the nights when the wind is still and the shadows grow long across the lawn. I wonder whose child sleeps in that crib. And I wonder if someday another key will find its way to another mailbox with another tag that simply reads home. Story 9. I still remember the sound that started it all. A hollow echo beneath the bathtub as I knelt on worn ceramic tiles, my knuckles rapping gently against the floor. It was different from the solid thud I'd heard everywhere else in the small bathroom. The kind of sound that doesn't register right away, but lingers in your mind like a half-forgotten melody. I was working a routine investigation in Coldwater Creek, a town where nothing remarkable ever happened. At least, that's what the locals insisted whenever an outsider like me asked questions. The house at 147 Maple Street had been purchased by a young couple, Eliza and Thomas Byen, who moved from Chicago seeking the quiet life that small towns promise in real estate brochures. They'd been renovating the 1940s bungalow for 3 months when Eliza decided to remodel the upstairs bathroom. I was just trying to pry up the old tiles, she told me, her voice still trembling slightly when I interviewed her. They were this awful mint green, probably from the 60s. It was Eliza's gentle tapping, looking for loose tiles, that revealed the inconsistency beneath the tub, a hollow space where there shouldn't have been one. The day was overcast when I first arrived at the house, the kind of heavy gray sky that makes afternoon feel like early evening. The Byans' home sat at the end of a street lined with sugar maples that had stubbornly held onto their leaves deep into November. The air smelled of wet earth and decay, that particular scent that belongs only to late autumn. I remember walking through their front door, notebook in hand, wondering if this call would be another waste of time. Small towns have a way of turning minor oddities into major concerns, but sometimes, rarely, they hide secrets that deserve to be uncovered. Thomas Byen met me in the foyer, a tall man with the kind of practiced calm that suggests internal turmoil. "She's upstairs," he said quietly. "She hasn't left the guest room since she found it." The staircase creaked under my weight as I ascended, each step a century old and vocal about it. The hallway was narrow, walls freshly painted in a warm cream that hadn't yet lost its chemical smell. The bathroom door stood open, construction plastic draped across the threshold. I ducked under the sheeting and found myself in a half-demolished space. Shards of mint green tile littered the floor like broken sea glass. The bathtub, a heavy cast iron clawfoot, had been partially pulled away from the wall, revealing a rough hole in the concrete beneath it. The edges were jagged where Eliza had taken a sledgehammer to it after discovering the hollow space. Kneeling beside the opening, I shone my flashlight into the darkness. The beam caught on something metallic, the corner of a box nestled in a makeshift cavity beneath the floor. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a shoebox, but made of metal that had oxidized to a deep rust red over what must have been decades. "I didn't touch it after I saw what was inside," Eliza said from the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself despite the warmth of the house. "I called the police right away." I nodded, pulling on latex gloves before carefully extracting the box from its hiding place. It wasn't heavy, but something shifted inside as I moved it. The lid was sealed with what appeared to be electrical tape, now brittle with age. It cracked and flaked away as I gently pried it open. The smell hit me first, old paper and something chemical, like preserved photographs. Inside, neatly arranged, were newspaper clippings, not random articles but missing persons reports, 12 in total, dating from 1973 to 1989. Each featured a photograph of someone who had disappeared, their faces circled in red ink that hadn't faded much over the decades. The youngest was a 19-year-old college student named Jennifer Hayes, reported missing while visiting her grandmother in Coldwater Creek. The oldest, a 56-year-old traveling salesman who checked into the local motel and never checked out. Between them, 10 others, all visitors to the town, all eventually filed away as cold cases when leads ran dry. What made my blood run cold wasn't the clippings themselves. It was what lay beneath them, a handwritten label affixed to the bottom of the box with yellowed Scotch tape. 5 words in careful block letters. Next one lives here now. I remember looking up at Eliza Byen, whose pale face told me she'd seen those words too. The bathroom suddenly felt several degrees colder. The previous owner, I said quietly. How long did they live here? That's the thing, Thomas answered from behind his wife. The elderly woman who sold us the house had only lived here for 2 years. She bought it from the estate of the previous owner, a man named Harold Chambers who lived here for decades. He died alone in this house. I carefully photographed everything before touching any of the clippings. Each one represented a life interrupted, a family left wondering, and now, potentially, answers to questions that had haunted this community for nearly 50 years. The investigation that followed consumed the next 18 months of my life. I lived and breathed the case, tracing the history of the house and its occupants back through decades of town records. Harold Chambers had purchased the property in 1970, a quiet man who worked as a janitor at the local high school. Neighbors described him as polite but private, the kind of person who nodded hello but never stopped to chat, the kind of person who becomes invisible in plain sight. The bathroom renovation had been done in 1972, according to permits filed with the county, just before the first disappearance. What troubled me most wasn't just the evidence we were uncovering, it was how easily Harold Chambers had blended into the community. In photos from school yearbooks, he appeared in the background of countless images, a slight figure with a push broom or mop, his face unremarkable, present but unseen. Year after year, as people vanished from Coldwater Creek, he remained a constant, unnoticed presence. We found no bodies buried on the property, despite extensive searches with ground-penetrating radar. Whatever Harold Chambers had done with his victims, if they were indeed his victims, remained a mystery. The box was our only concrete evidence, and even that provided more questions than answers. DNA testing on the tape and newspaper clippings yielded partial fingerprints that matched Chambers, confirming what we already suspected. But without remains, without confessions, without witnesses, the case remained frustratingly incomplete. 6 months into the investigation, I received a call from Thomas Byen. They'd found something else during the continued renovation, a journal hidden inside a sealed portion of the attic wall. Harold Chambers' private thoughts, spanning 30 years, written in the same careful block letters as the label in the box. The journal never explicitly confessed to murders. Instead, it detailed relationships with people who had chosen to stay in Coldwater Creek. It spoke of helping them belong to the town forever. Most disturbing were the repeated references to the creek itself, how its waters preserved and welcomed those who would otherwise have left and forgotten this place. Coldwater Creek winds through the northern forest, deep and swift in parts, sluggish and shallow in others. Its muddy banks and numerous tributaries spread for miles through dense woods, a perfect place to hide secrets. In the spring thaw following our discovery, when the creek ran high and fast with melted snow, the first body emerged. The remains of Jennifer Hayes, identified by dental records, were found partially preserved in a deep, muddy embankment that had eroded during recent flooding. She'd been missing for 47 years. Over the following weeks, 7 more victims were recovered from various points along the creek. Each had been carefully weighted down in the deeper pools, preserved by the cold, oxygen-poor environment. Harold Chambers, it seemed, had made them part of Coldwater Creek in the most literal sense. 4 victims remain missing. The investigation continues, though with diminishing resources as the months pass. Sometimes I drive by 147 Maple Street, now vacant again after the Byans moved away, unable to live with what they'd discovered. The house sits quiet, windows empty, waiting for someone new who doesn't know its history. I often think about that hollow sound beneath the bathtub, how easily it might have gone unnoticed if Eliza hadn't been renovating. How many other houses harbor secrets behind their walls or beneath their floors? How many other Herald chambers blend into communities, hiding in plain sight? The box sits in an evidence locker now, its contents cataloged and preserved. Those 5 words still haunt me. Next one lives here now. Was it a threat, a confession, a prediction? Harold Chambers took that answer to his grave. Sometimes in the dark hours before dawn, I find myself wondering about the previous owner, the elderly woman who lived there briefly before selling to the Byans. Did she ever hear that hollow echo? Did she ever feel watched by the house itself? Or did she simply live there, unaware that she was sleeping above the evidence of decades of carefully orchestrated disappearances? In this line of work, closure is rare. But rarer still is a case that changes how you see the ordinary world around you. Now, when I walk through my own house at night, I find myself listening for unusual echoes, for spaces that sound hollow when they should be solid. Because sometimes the most terrifying secrets aren't hidden in remote locations or elaborate concealment. Sometimes they're just beneath the surface of everyday life, separated from discovery by nothing more than a layer of concrete and decades of silence. Story 10, the weathered envelope, its corners tinged with age, bore a fresh stamp just recently sent. With caution, the detective unfolded it. Inside lay a lone sheet of paper, its words typed hurriedly in an uneven script. I am sorry for what I did. The paper felt damp to the touch, a faint scent of iron lingering in the air. It was then that the detective noticed the reddish smear along the bottom edge, unmistakably not ink. Detective Sarah Morgan carefully placed the letter into an evidence bag, her gloved hands deftly preserving the potential clues. The forensic team's findings confirmed her suspicions the reddish stain was human blood, matching the DNA from an unsolved homicide case that had plagued the department for years. The victim, Rebecca Warren, a young journalist, was discovered in her apartment, bearing multiple stab wounds. Her laptop gone, her notes scattered, hinting that the attack might be linked to an unfinished story. The case had grown cold, despite exhaustive interviews and relentless investigation. And now this mysterious letter had landed at the precinct, simply addressed to the homicide division. The paper and envelope yielded minimal fingerprints, only smudges hinting that the sender had taken care to wear gloves. The postmark, however, provided a vital light after months of stagnation. Morgan gathered her team in the briefing room, where the walls bore witness to the frustration of dead-end lights and missed connections. She affixed the image of the letter at the heart of the board. This changes everything, she declared to the room. The killer shows remorse. Detective James Chen, her long-standing partner on the case, scrutinized the letter. Or perhaps they wish us to believe so, he countered. The blood could be a theatrical ploy, a taunting gesture. The forensics team traced the unique typewriter impression to a model long out of production, a rarity but not unattainable. They reached out to antique enthusiasts and collectors across the region. As the investigation gained traction, they delved into Rebecca's life. Her editor described her as relentless, committed to unveiling corruption. Her recent assignment involved probing a wealthy family with ties to local politics. The family's patriarch had recently passed, leaving behind a contentious will sparking disputes among siblings. The detectives revisited Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes. Initially devastated during their first encounter months earlier, he now displayed subtle shifts in behavior, furtive glances, trembling hands. Rebecca spoke of being followed, he confessed in their latest conversation. I brushed it off as paranoia due to her investigation. I should have paid heed. While the detectives pursued this lead, a second letter arrived, bearing the same typewritten message, stained with blood once more. This time the confession was more detailed. She delved too deeply into the family secrets, the inheritance, the truth about the patriarch. It was never my intention for things to escalate that far. The trail led to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, resided. Among his collection of antiques were various vintage typewriters. His responses to inquiries seemed rehearsed, unnaturally polished. The breakthrough came when fibers on the envelopes matched stationery peculiar to the youngest daughter, Eleanor, used exclusively by the family. Questioned, Eleanor disclosed that Richard had borrowed her stationery weeks prior. A search of Richard's residence unearthed a concealed room containing articles about Rebecca, surveillance materials, and a vintage typewriter identical to the one used for the letters. Blood analysis confirmed it belonged to Rebecca. Unexpectedly, a link emerged between Richard and Michael, a significant sum transferred from Richard to Michael preceding Rebecca's demise. Confronted, Michael broke down. Rebecca uncovered evidence of Richard poisoning his father for the inheritance, he divulged. I informed Richard of her discoveries, intending to intimidate her into silence. I never imagined he would resort to murder. The final puzzle piece materialized when Eleanor presented a clandestine recording, capturing Richard and Michael plotting against Rebecca. Richard's voice was unmistakable. She must be silenced permanently. Richard was apprehended attempting to flee. The prosecution built a case around the letters, the typewriter, financial transactions, and Eleanor's recording. Michael accepted a plea bargain in exchange for testimony. Throughout the trial, Richard maintained his innocence, placing blame on Michael, alleging a setup. Yet the weight of evidence was insurmountable. The jury swiftly returned a guilty verdict after brief deliberation. As Richard was led away, handcuffed, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents in the courtroom. Though no words could assuage their loss, the conviction offered a semblance of closure. The blood-stained letters remained in evidence, a poignant reminder that even the most meticulously planned crimes leave traces, and that remorse, whether authentic or calculated, can unravel those who believe they've executed the perfect crime. Rebecca Warren's case stood as a cornerstone in detective education, imparting the lesson that breakthroughs may stem not from advanced forensics, but from a humble typewriter and the burden of guilt weighing on a killer's soul. Story 11. The old Polaroid held secrets from a distant past, capturing a forgotten birthday moment. Among the familiar smiles and flickering candles, a hidden presence lurked, unnoticed by those in the frame. When Sarah Winters uncovered the box of aged photographs in her late mother's attic, she stumbled upon a chilling mystery. The box, simply labeled Memories, contained snapshots of happier times, or so it seemed at first glance. Yet as Sarah delved deeper, she unearthed a sinister truth veiled within the images. The initial photo revealed a faint silhouette in the background, barely discernible during her childhood birthday celebration. As she sifted through the pictures, the shadowy figure ominously crept closer with each passing moment. Despite not being part of the family, he insidiously made his presence felt, moving from the periphery to the very heart of the gatherings. Concerned and bewildered, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers to the enigmatic figure haunting the photographs. But his response was one of confusion and denial, claiming that no stranger should have been present at those joyous occasions. Determined to unravel the mystery, Sarah took digital copies of the Polaroids and shared them with her father, hoping to shed light on the inexplicable intruder. Detective Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigator, listened attentively as Sarah laid out the disturbing progression of the shadowy figure's advance through the family photos. Rain tapped against the windows of the precinct, creating an ambient backdrop to the unfolding mystery. With a keen eye for detail, Detective Reed examined the images, his curiosity piqued by the eerie sequence of events captured in the snapshots. As Sarah revealed the relentless pursuit of the mysterious figure across different gatherings and years, the detective's skepticism wavered, replaced by a growing sense of unease. The shadowy intruder's calculated movements hinted at a sinister purpose, a dark presence lurking on the fringes of cherished memories. With the aid of modern technology and forensic analysis, the identity of the elusive figure began to emerge from the shadows. Details once obscured came to light, linking the ominous presence to a long-forgotten individual named Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a dark history of unsolved child abductions. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, connecting past tragedies to the chilling events captured in the family photos. The revelation of Keller's twisted past sent shockwaves through the community, shedding light on decades-old mysteries and bringing closure to families long haunted by unanswered questions. As the truth unraveled, Sarah found herself at the center of a web of darkness, confronting the hidden terrors that had lurked behind the facade of her childhood memories. In a quiet moment of reflection, surrounded by the haunting photographs, Sarah came to terms with the chilling reality that had been concealed for so long. The shadow in the family photos, once a spectral presence haunting her past, had finally been unmasked, his malevolent deeds brought to light by the relentless pursuit of justice. With a heavy heart, Sarah returned the photos to their box, now transformed into evidence of a harrowing truth. The unseen threats captured in those snapshots served as a stark reminder that danger could lurk in the most unsuspecting places, hidden from view but ever present, waiting to emerge from the shadows and disrupt the tranquility of cherished moments frozen in time. Story 12. The old wooden plank shifted under Sarah's weight, drawing her gaze downward. Intrigued, she knelt to inspect the hidden space beneath her feet. A faint sense of unease crept over her as she felt the floor's secrets beckoning to be uncovered. With cautious determination, she lifted the boards, revealing a dim, mysterious chamber below the house. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah peered into the darkness, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. The hidden room held more than just forgotten belongings, it held a chilling truth that had been concealed for far too long. "Don't disturb anything," Detective Reed's voice was steady, a comforting presence in the eerie stillness. The flashlight's beam cut through the shadows, revealing a haunting collection of surveillance photos lining the walls. Images of Sarah, captured in moments of unsuspecting vulnerability, stared back at her. It was a shrine of obsession, meticulously crafted beneath her very home. The cottage, once charming and quaint, had a dark past unknown to its new owner. Sarah had unwittingly stepped into a twisted narrative left behind by the deceased previous owner, Walter Green, the man who had watched her, studied her every move, and meticulously planned a future that only he believed in. As the investigators combed through the hidden room, a disturbing timeline emerged. Walter had been fixated on Sarah for years, his obsession escalating in secret as he mirrored her life in his own twisted way. The realization sent shivers down everyone's spine, a reminder of how close Sarah had come to a fate she never imagined. Detective Reed's pursuit of the truth led her to a startling revelation, a coworker of Walter's who hinted at darker intentions behind the facade of a harmless crush. The key found in Walter's locker unlocked a storage unit filled with replicas of Sarah's belongings, a chilling replica of her life, meticulously recreated by a man consumed by delusion. Walter's past of untreated obsession and delusion painted a grim picture of the dangers Sarah had unknowingly faced. The line between reality and fantasy blurred in his mind, leading to a plan that could have ended in tragedy if not for a stroke of fate. Sarah's decision to leave the house behind was a bittersweet relief, a step towards reclaiming her sense of security and peace. The echoes of Walter's presence lingered, a reminder of the darkness that had once lurked just beneath the surface of her seemingly idyllic home. The case closed with Walter's death, but the impact of his actions lingered on in the minds of those involved. Sarah's resilience in the face of danger, Detective Reed's unwavering dedication to justice, and the chilling tale of the room beneath the floor all intertwined in a narrative of fear, survival, and the haunting presence of a man lost to his own obsessions. Life moved on, the house passed into new hands, the hidden room sealed off and forgotten. But for those who knew the truth, the memory of what lay beneath the floorboards served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. Story 13. In the quiet of the night, a faint flicker danced on the baby monitor screen, a subtle disturbance that caught the mother's attention. At first, she brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the system. But then, as if the air itself held its breath, the audio crackled and a voice, soft and eerie, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down her spine, her heart skipping a beat in the darkness. With a sense of dread creeping over her, she hurried to her son's room, each step echoing in the stillness of the house. Her pulse raced, matching the rhythm of her pounding heart as she reached the crib only to find it empty. Panic gripped her as she scanned the room, closed window, locked door. Everything seemed undisturbed, except for a lone stuffed rabbit lying on the floor, its unblinking black eyes fixed on her. Rebecca's scream pierced the night, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the walls, reaching the ears of concerned neighbors who swiftly dialed emergency services. When the authorities arrived, they found her on the nursery floor, cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of disbelief and fear. Her infant son, Samuel, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that no amount of searching could fill. The investigation that followed was shrouded in mystery. No signs of forced entry marred the home, the security system remained intact, and the baby monitor footage revealed only the unsettling voice and static that had haunted Rebecca. Questions lingered like shadows. How could someone enter a locked home, snatch a child, and vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a haunting whisper? Suspicion soon turned to Rebecca herself. Her history of postpartum struggles and the strained dynamics within her marriage cast a cloud of doubt over her grief-stricken state. But then a glimmer of hope emerged from the darkness. Tiny fibers, foreign and unknown, were discovered on the nursery windowsill, a clue that pointed to an intruder skilled in the art of stealth. The focus shifted, revealing glimpses of a shadowy figure moving in the night, leaving behind traces of a clandestine presence. Daniel, the husband, returned to a storm of accusations and suspicions, his hands bearing the telltale signs of a secretive hobby rock climbing, a newfound pursuit to mask his inner turmoil. As layers of deception unraveled, a chilling truth emerged. Daniel's hidden life, entwined with another family, painted a portrait of betrayal and greed. The baby monitor, once a source of comfort, became a conduit for manipulation, its innocent signals twisted by unseen hands. and in a basement, a woman named Elaine was found, cradling Samuel as if he were a long-lost dream. Her vacant eyes spoke of a longing that had turned to obsession, a past that had bled into the present with devastating consequences. The trial laid bare a web of lies and deceit, each thread leading back to Daniel and Elaine, their voices mingling in whispered plans of deceit. The hushed tones captured by the monitor held more than just words, they held the echoes of a nightmare made real. And as the truth resounded in the courtroom, justice meted out its verdict, condemning the guilty to face the consequences of their actions. Rebecca and Samuel found solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. The stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to the turmoil that had unfolded, remained tucked away in a box, a reminder of the night that changed everything. The baby monitor, now silent, stood as a testament to the fragility of trust and the darkness that can lurk within the most unsuspecting places. And as the night whispered its lullabies, Samuel slept on, unaware of the secrets that had once threatened to steal him away. Story 14. As she cleared the steam from the mirror, gazing at her reflection, a sense of unease crept over her. Everything appeared normal, her face, her attire. Yet a lingering disquiet settled within her as she stared longer. A flicker caught in the corner of her vision, a movement that defied explanation. And when she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing her in eerie silence. This unsettling moment in her bathroom marked the beginning of Rebecca Thorne's perplexing journey. A tale that would baffle investigators and haunt a community for years to come. Rebecca resided in a modest apartment in a serene suburban enclave, living a solitary existence. Her acquaintances described her as methodical, reserved, a woman who led a solitary life but maintained friendly relations with her neighbors. By profession, she was a data analyst at a mid-sized company, her days dictated by routine and precision. Nothing in her demeanor hinted at the enigma that would thrust her into the heart of one of the most mystifying criminal investigations of the era. The initial signs were subtle. Objects in Rebecca's home seemed slightly rearranged, nothing missing, just subtly shifted. A coffee mug on a different shelf, books rearranged, her toothbrush in an unfamiliar spot. Initially dismissing these occurrences as bouts of forgetfulness, she attributed them to long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her eyes until reality blurred. When Rebecca finally reached out to the authorities after weeks of these disturbances, Detective Marion Shaw was the first to receive her report. Initially, the assessment leaned towards mental health concerns rather than criminal activity. The absence of tangible evidence, no broken locks, no missing items, no signs of forced entry led Shaw to categorize it as a matter for mental health services, not law enforcement. There was an intangible sense of unease, Shaw would later recount. Just a woman who felt out of place in her own home. However, the pivotal moment arrived with the incident involving the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the chilling experience in vivid detail, the unsettling sensation of her reflection moving independently, the pervasive feeling of being watched even in solitude. This time, she presented evidence in the form of security footage from a camera she had installed, focused on her front door. The footage unveiled a revelation that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. The grainy video depicted Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, only to witness an identical figure using a key to enter her apartment 20 minutes later. Forensic scrutiny of the footage revealed no signs of tampering or digital manipulation. The intruder moved with a precision that mirrored Rebecca's every gesture, attire, and even her distinctive leather bag. Yet, according to time-stamped records from her workplace's security system, Rebecca had already swiped into her office across town. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can mimic her with uncanny accuracy." The investigation delved deeper. Fingerprints found throughout the apartment matched only Rebecca's. No foreign DNA traces were unearthed. Neighbors reported witnessing nothing unusual, only Rebecca's routine comings and goings. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, mentioned a peculiar encounter where she greeted Rebecca upon her return one evening, receiving no response, a departure from the norm, yet not deemed alarming. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations within her home escalated. Food vanished from her fridge without recollection. Her computer revealed searches she hadn't initiated. Most unsettling were the photographs on her phone selfies that bore her likeness but were absent from her memory. In some, her expression appeared subtly off-kilter, her smile too wide, her gaze too intense. "I'm teetering on the edge of madness," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or perhaps someone is orchestrating this illusion to drive me to the brink." The breakthrough emerged when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated when Rebecca departed for specific appointments, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, predetermined activities with predictable durations. "Someone possesses an intimate knowledge of your routine," Shaw elucidated. "This isn't happenstance. This is targeted surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist posited a theory of fixation, a scenario where an individual becomes fixated on another, yearning to inhabit their life, potentially aiming to supplant them entirely. Though rare, such cases were documented in psychological literature. The culprit typically underwent a psychological rupture, fixating on a victim embodying traits they coveted: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The focus narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former co-worker, Lily Winters, who had been terminated due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often noting resemblances between them. Following her dismissal, she dispatched a series of disconcerting emails to Rebecca. "We could be interchangeable," one message stated. "At times, I feel more like you than you do." Upon obtaining a warrant to search Lily's abode, investigators unearthed a revelation that transformed the case from disquieting to chilling. Within Lily's residence, one room had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls adorned with photographs, countless images of Rebecca entering her apartment, shopping, socializing, captured without her knowledge. The closet harbored duplicates of Rebecca's wardrobe. Makeup matching Rebecca's preferred brands adorned a vanity alongside meticulous notes on her gestures, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most chilling were the practice videos Lily mimicking Rebecca's gait, mannerisms, expressions. The evolution was palpable: initial attempts awkward and conspicuous, later ones nearly indistinguishable from the authentic Rebecca. "She aspired to be me," Rebecca murmured upon viewing the evidence. "It wasn't mere imitation. She sought to obliterate me." Forensic analysts uncovered sophisticated tools for crafting key replicas and duplicating electronic access cards. Lily had orchestrated an elaborate system to monitor Rebecca's movements, including a calendar predicting her schedule in detail. Yet, Lily's ultimate objective remained an enigma. Journals discovered in Lily's quarters contained rambling entries oscillating between first and third person, occasionally referring to Rebecca as me and her in the same passage. The final entry sent shivers down the investigators' spines. "Soon one of us will prevail. The stronger entity will endure." When the authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her hasty departure from her residence drawers left ajar. Certain technology missing indicated flight. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was ushered into protective custody, relocated to a fortified refuge under constant surveillance. For 3 weeks, authorities surveilled every location linked to Rebecca's former life. Lily never materialized. The case took a disquieting turn when a security guard at Rebecca's previous workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave and safeguarded in a secure refuge, Rebecca had been sighted entering the building. Surveillance footage corroborated the account. A figure identical to Rebecca had utilized a valid ID card to access the premises, perused her former workstation for 40 minutes, then exited. The implications became stark. Lily hadn't fled, she had executed her plan. She now inhabited Rebecca's existence, usurping her identity while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. Case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters remains at large. Rebecca Thorne refrained from resuming her former life, forging a fresh identity in a clandestine locale. Detective Shaw retains a photograph on her desk depicting two strikingly similar women, Rebecca Thorne and Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their features, seeking nuances that demarcate one from the other. The truly disquieting aspect Shaw often imparts to new recruits isn't the resemblance in appearance or voice. It's the fervor with which someone pursues becoming you to the extent that they efface themselves in the process. Our identity isn't solely what we present, it's what we guard most vigilantly. And at times, we fail to grasp its worth until someone endeavors to usurp it. Story 15. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, a mysterious key arrived in the mail for Sarah Miller, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. The single brass key, worn with time, felt strangely familiar to her, yet it didn't fit any lock in her home. When placed on the coffee table, the broken grandfather clock chimed, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. Reporting the strange occurrence to authorities, Sarah's concerns were initially dismissed as a simple mistake, but a sense of unease lingered, prompting the officer to take the key as evidence. Little did they know, this seemingly innocuous key would unravel a disturbing criminal investigation that had lurked in the shadows for years. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition, found himself drawn into the mysterious case. The brass key sat on his desk, a silent enigma waiting to be unraveled. Background checks on Sarah revealed no red flags, no hint of wrongdoing. She was just an innocent recipient of a sinister gift. Forensic examinations yielded no fingerprints besides Sarah's, no DNA traces, no clues in the generic postmarked envelope. But a breakthrough came when the key's unique pattern matched a cold case involving a storage unit filled with chilling evidence of unsolved crimes against women. As the investigation deepened, Sarah's anxiety grew, leading her to fortify her home against an unseen threat. The key seemed to be a macabre message, a dark invitation from an unknown sender. The search for the key's origin led to Harold Jenkins, a quiet neighbor with a hidden past. The hunt for Jenkins intensified, revealing a trail of darkness leading to a secluded cabin. Beneath the floorboards lay a hidden room filled with rows of brass keys, each a haunting reminder of lives taken too soon. The discovery of human remains behind the cabin unveiled the true extent of Jenkins' horrors. A nationwide manhunt ensued, as fear gripped the community labeled by the press as the Keymaster's hunting ground. Jenkins' twisted motivations came to light, painting a portrait of a predator lurking among unsuspecting neighbors. The final confrontation with Jenkins ended in tragedy as he chose death over capture. His journal, a chilling account of his crimes, addressed Sarah directly, revealing the twisted obsession that had led to the horrors unleashed upon her doorstep. In the aftermath, 32 victims were identified, bringing closure to families torn apart by loss. Sarah, haunted by the darkness that had touched her life, never returned home, leaving behind a clock that had once echoed with ominous chimes. The case of the Keymaster stands as a stark reminder of the evil that can lurk behind a facade of normalcy. As researchers delve into Jenkins' writings for insights, a collection of silent brass keys in an evidence locker bears witness to the devastating truth hidden behind unassuming appearances, a truth that can only be unlocked by acknowledging the darkness that dwells within. Story 16, The Abandoned Victorian. She entered through the front door, a cloud of dust dancing in the stagnant air. The house, a relic of a forgotten time, stood frozen in its decay, furniture draped in ghostly sheets, walls shedding their memories. Every step felt like a voyage into a suspended moment, a journey through the whispers of the past, except for one peculiar detail that defied explanation. The doors. No matter which one she opened, no matter the path she chose, each doorway led back to the same room, the parlor. A maze of corridors and chambers, all converging into a singular point of return. The house held her in its enigmatic grip, offering no escape except the way she had come. But when she turned to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished into thin air, leaving her stranded in a realm of shifting shadows. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless form had transformed the abandoned Victorian from a mere curiosity to a scene of mystery and intrigue. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, observing as forensic experts moved through the dim interior like phantoms, unraveling the enigma that had shrouded the house for years. The locals whispered of the peculiarities that plagued the house, the way compasses spun wildly, the sensation of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. But now, the secrets buried within its decaying walls veered into a realm far darker than mere superstition. The initial examination suggests she passed 3 days ago, the medical examiner murmured, his voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. Asphyxiation seems to be the cause of her demise. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her serene countenance turned towards the entrance as if anticipating a visitor. Her hands lay folded neatly in her lap, devoid of any signs of struggle or resistance. The scene exuded a haunting stillness, a tranquility that belied the tragedy it concealed, unsettling even the most seasoned investigators. "Who stumbled upon the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze scanning the notes before her. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner responded. They entered, caught sight of her figure, mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew near. The house had languished in abandonment since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly half a decade earlier. Legal disputes had cast a shadow over the property, rendering it unwanted, unsold, a forgotten relic haunted by vandals and thrill-seekers. Morgan Pierce, a young scholar in pursuit of architectural enigmas for her thesis, had been drawn to the Victorian's mystique. Her friends painted a portrait of a meticulous, driven individual captivated by spaces that defied conventional norms. The house, renowned for its ability to disorient and bewilder, had beckoned to her with an irresistible allure. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days prior, Lind noted. Morgan spoke of visiting the house where people vanish for her studies. The investigation unveiled a trail of Morgan's visits to the house in the weeks leading to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustic phenomena, unexplained cold spots and doors that defied logic by leading to different destinations with each opening. In her final musings, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to document what she cryptically referred to as spatial aberrations. Yet, this equipment remained conspicuously absent from the scene. The autopsy uncovered an unexpected detail, a trace presence of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant associated with shamanic rituals. While the substance could induce disorientation and vivid illusions, the dosage found in her body fell short of lethal levels. She was no casual user, her partner asserted during interrogation. Morgan adhered strictly to her research protocols. She wouldn't have jeopardized her faculties intentionally. Digital traces on Morgan's phone unveiled fragments of deleted conversations with a kindred spirit who shared her fascination with the house, an individual claiming to hold insight into its mysteries. The exchanges evolved from professional discourse to intimate riddles, hinting at a deeper connection. The house retains its memories, one message disclosed. It yearns for someone to acknowledge its truths. The trail led investigators to Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural history whose correspondence with Morgan had flourished into a bond transcending the professional realm. Reeves, when questioned, expressed profound grief over her untimely end. "The house bears a reputation," he confided. Its original architect wove illusions and deceptive perspectives into its design, intending to bewilder and disorient. Morgan believed there lay a deeper truth concealed within its walls, beyond mere optical tricks. Yet Reeves possessed a solid alibi for the presumed time of Morgan's passing, substantiated by security footage capturing him delivering a lecture at a university event miles away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, the revelation of a hidden family secret by Alina Blackwood's grandson, now residing overseas. Contacted by the authorities, he unveiled a legacy of tragedies concealed for generations. "My grandmother was not the sole Blackwood to meet her fate within those walls," he disclosed. Others followed, all discovered in the parlor, their expressions peaceful. The family referred to it as the claiming. Journals spanning decades, chronicling deaths initially attributed to natural causes like heart failure or stroke, were relinquished to the investigators. The pattern they unveiled was chilling. Individuals who lingered within the house eventually succumbed to what the family euphemistically dubbed the influence. A secondary sweep of the premises unearthed a concealed chamber behind the parlor's hearth. Inside lay Morgan's missing equipment alongside a collection of artifacts representing diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously arranged in a geometric tableau. At the heart of this assembly sat a weathered figurine, bearing the features of a deity linked to liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds. Traces of the alkaloid detected in Morgan's system adorn these relics. The case took a macabre turn with the revelation that someone else had been present at Morgan's demise, as indicated by forensic analysis of the dust patterns within the house. Partial fingerprints, distinct from Morgan's or any documented visitors, adorned the doorknobs scattered throughout the estate. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his residence, mirroring Morgan's posture, the same alkaloid lacing his veins. Clenched in his grasp was a key that defied identification within his abode, yet seamlessly unlocked the hidden compartment within the Victorian. In his parting correspondence, a message to himself as if etching a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house does not bind you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct, the doors guide you in circles, yet a semblance of progress deceives you. Once enlightenment dawns, departure becomes feasible, but by then, departure loses its allure. The case, shrouded in shadows and uncertainty, lingered as unresolved deaths under official scrutiny. The Victorian, tainted by the specter of tragedy, was condemned and sealed off by the authorities. Yet murmurs persisted of flickering lights within its confines on certain evenings, of guests who entered but never emerged. Among the locals, whispers circulated of a malevolent force claiming those who delved too deeply into its enigmas. Others clung to the belief that Morgan and Reeves had unearthed a potent, age-old secret dwelling within the interstices of conventional reality. The truth, elusive as a vanishing exit in a house where all paths led back to the genesis, remained veiled in obscurity, a riddle echoing through the corridors of time. Story 17. In the sleepy town there was a house forgotten at the edge of the woods. It lingered in solitude, with darkened windows and a porch weighed down by the passage of time. No one laid claim to it, and the origins of its construction faded into obscurity. Whispers about the house were scarce, as if the townsfolk had collectively decided to erase it from memory. But one day, a group of hikers strayed too close and stumbled upon a chilling sight, names carved into the wooden siding, etched deep like ancient runes of warning. And at the very bottom of the list, freshly carved and untouched by time, was a name that none of them recognized, until a voice, trembling with fear, whispered, "That name is mine." Under the cover of night, a call came through to the dispatch center, a routine report of trespassing. The caller was Mason Wright, the lead hiker who discovered his own name etched into the abandoned house. Responding officers anticipated a simple case of mischief, perhaps a prank gone awry, but what they encountered defied all logic. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness draped the forest in its shroud. Her flashlight beam pierced the shadows, revealing the weathered facade of the mysterious structure. The names 27 in total stood as a haunting testament to the unknown. Some had withered with time, almost blending into the aged wood, while others remained sharp and distinct as if carved just moments ago. And at the end of the list, Mason Wright, the carving still fresh, with remnants of sawdust clinging to its edges. "I've never set foot here before," Mason protested, his breath forming wisps in the cold night air. "I cannot fathom how my name came to be here." The investigation commenced with thorough checks on each name inscribed on the wall. The findings sent shivers down the spines of the detective team. Every name belonged to an individual reported missing over the span of 4 decades. Some cases had grown cold with time, while others remained open, a specter haunting the families left behind. Yet a common thread ran through all the cases. The missing individuals had vanished while hiking alone, swallowed by the unforgiving wilderness. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the depths of the cuts, the techniques used, and the patterns of weathering. The earliest name, Rebecca Hansen, tied back to a disappearance from 37 years prior, a tale of a young woman who ventured into the woods and never returned, leaving behind only a solitary hiking boot by a quiet stream. Detective Keller delved deep into Mason's past, searching for any link to the enigmatic house or the names on its walls. His accounts remained unwavering, with no connections unearthed that could tie him to the other missing hikers. Attention then shifted to Mason's companions. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, shared images captured during their hike. Upon closer inspection, analysts noticed a disquieting presence, a blurred figure lurking in the background of multiple photos, a tall, slender silhouette obscured by the veil of trees. "We encountered no one else on our journey," Emily maintained. "We would have remembered such an encounter." As Detective Keller authorized a search of the house's interior, a grim discovery awaited the officers. Though the structure appeared abandoned and forlorn, a chilling scene unfolded in the basement. Personal belongings of the missing hikers were meticulously arranged on wooden shelves: watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, all labeled with the corresponding names etched outside on the wall. The evidence technicians meticulously cataloged each item, underlining the eerie precision with which they had been preserved. Under the harsh glow of ultraviolet light, traces of blood emerged on the cold concrete floor, a silent witness to unspeakable horrors that had unfolded in the shadows. Despite exhaustive searches, no bodies were found buried beneath the house. However, the keen senses of cadaver dogs repeatedly led the investigators to the dense thicket at the rear of the property, where the forest withheld its darkest secrets. As the investigation spiraled deeper, Detective Keller observed a shift in Mason's demeanor. He reported bizarre incidents, whispers echoing outside his residence, enigmatic footprints leading to his door but vanishing into thin air, and phantom figures observing him from the dimly lit streets. Concerned for his safety, the department assigned an officer to safeguard him, yet Mason's paranoia only escalated. A breakthrough emerged when buried land records surfaced from the depths of county archives, revealing that the house had once belonged to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood. Accounts from neighbors painted a picture of a towering, gaunt man who shunned society, a figure who had faded into the mists of the unknown 15 years prior, his disappearance left unexamined. Armed with a warrant, Detective Keller spearheaded an exploration of the surrounding forest, unearthing a network of crude hunting blinds strategically positioned along the well-trodden paths of unsuspecting hikers. Within one of these blinds lay a journal, a chilling chronicle of meticulous observations, hikers' movements, their gear, and their vulnerabilities. The handwriting within mirrored samples from Victor Blackwood's scant documents, evolving from notes on animal hunting to macabre accounts of human prey and the selection process that led to their fateful encounters. A manhunt of unprecedented scale was launched for Blackwood, spanning multiple jurisdictions. Helicopters scoured the forest with thermal imaging, and tactical teams combed every nook and cranny. Yet the elusive hunter remained a phantom, evading capture at every turn. Meanwhile, Mason Wright withdrew from the world, his whereabouts unknown. Officers dispatched to his residence found it deserted, with only a chilling inscription on his bedroom wall: "The hunter becomes the hunted." Weeks passed in fruitless pursuit of Mason, until a startling revelation came to light during a secondary sweep of Blackwood's house. Concealed behind a false panel in the basement, investigators unearthed a grim workshop replete with woodworking tools, jars of preservatives, and a freshly carved piece of wood bearing a new name, one that struck a chord of dread within Detective Keller. It belonged to the lead forensic technician who had processed the house during the initial stages of the investigation. A technician who had called in sick that morning, unreachable by all means of communication. Authorities swiftly established a vigilant cordon around the house, implementing advanced surveillance systems to monitor every entrance and exit. The stage was set, the trap laid in anticipation. 3 nights later, a blip on the motion sensors set the operation in motion. Security cameras captured the spectral figure emerging from the depths of the forest, a towering, sinewy apparition moving with an uncanny grace. As tactical units closed in, the cameras faltered, losing sight of the figure for a fleeting moment. And when the feed resumed, the figure had vanished into the night, leaving behind only whispers of dread in its wake. To this day, the abandoned house remains under constant watch, a silent sentinel over the mysteries buried within its walls. Mason Wright and the missing forensic technician elude discovery, their fates intertwined with the shadows that haunt the forest. The investigation presses on, fueled by a grim determination to unravel the enigma that shrouds the names on the wall. A foreboding legend has taken root among law enforcement circles, a tale that few dare to recount. And the local hikers, once oblivious to the house's grim secrets, now steer clear of its path, lest their names join the forbidden roster, the names that echo in the darkness, the names that none dare speak. Story 18, The Enigmatic Dollhouse. She never fancied venturing up there, but circumstances led her to the attic. The storm had played its part in causing a leak in the roof, forcing her to confront the neglected space. The attic was a realm of relics, shrouded in dust and veiled by cobwebs. Amidst the forgotten items in the shadowiest corner sat an ancient dollhouse. Its eerie intricacy was unsettling, the minuscule furniture impeccably arranged. However, as she peered into its miniature rooms, a shiver ran through her. The figures inside were not mere dolls, they were tiny, meticulously carved replicas of her own kin. Each figure mirrored the exact positions of her family members downstairs. Yet there was a stark anomaly. The figure meant to represent her was not seated as the others were, but stood by the attic door. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse roof, feeling the indent where the tiny wooden figure stood. A chill crept through her, unrelated to the icy draft whispering through the attic rafters. The dollhouse had no place there. This wasn't her childhood abode, but a recent rental property her family had just moved into. The unsettling revelation prompted Rebecca to contact the authorities in a state of distress. Law enforcement officers arrived at the suburban residence to find a family in turmoil, huddled in fear in their living room, refusing to ascend the stairs. Detective Sarah Harmon, leading the investigation, initially brushed off their concerns as a potential hoax or a product of heightened anxiety in an unfamiliar setting. However, the intricate details of the dollhouse figures caught her attention. Each tiny figurine captured a distinctive trait of the family members: the father's receding hairline, the teenage son's hoodie, even the small birthmark on the mother's hand. The presence of fingerprints on the dollhouse, unmatched to any family member, and microscopic cameras hidden in the miniature figures' eyes unveiled a sinister reality. The cameras were linked to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse, recording the family's movements meticulously. The positions of the figures in the dollhouse didn't merely mirror the family's seating that evening, but replicated precise postures from various days, hinting at prolonged observation. Detective Harmon articulated, "We realized this was no ordinary case of stalking. The perpetrator exhibited an uncommon level of obsession seldom seen in criminal psychology." Further exploration revealed a concealed basement entrance behind a pantry wall, where investigators stumbled upon a makeshift living area, indicating someone had been dwelling beneath the family for weeks before their arrival. The absence of forced entry perplexed investigators, as property records disclosed the house had remained vacant for nearly a year prior to the Morgans moving in. The digital realm provided a breakthrough. Surveillance data from the dollhouse's cameras led investigators to a small apartment across town. Inside, walls adorned with photographs of the Morgan family and previous occupants hinted at a disturbing fixation. Journal entries meticulously detailed the daily routines of each family member, while a workshop contained numerous unfinished dollhouses representing various homes in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, son of the previous homeowners, who spiraled into debt following his parents' demise. Instead of selling the house, he lived surreptitiously within it, orchestrating a surveillance operation through the dollhouse replicas. A forensic psychologist noted the dollhouse was his domain of control, each figure symbolizing someone under his watchful eye. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed, confessing his need for assurance that the occupants respected his childhood home. His chilling statement, "I wanted them to know I was always watching," exposed a profound delusion of possession. Wells' psychological assessment unveiled a convoluted narrative of clinging to his past by manipulating the present. The Morgan family never returned to the house, haunted by the realization that their lives had been scrutinized and manipulated. Wells faced multiple charges, prompting a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws and agent responsibilities. The judge, reflecting on the invasion of the Morgans' privacy, emphasized the profound violation of their security and autonomy. Criminologists were disturbed by the extent of Wells' clandestine activities, as his journals hinted at years spent covertly inhabiting homes, crafting dollhouses of each observed family. The Morgans relocated far away, yet Rebecca's lingering unease manifested in habitual searches of hidden spaces. She rid their new home of all miniature figurines, haunted by the lingering fear of being watched from afar. "Some days I still sense unseen eyes upon me," Rebecca confessed. "I wonder if somewhere a tiny version of me is being manipulated in a dollhouse I have yet to uncover." Story 19. The gentle current moved languidly that morning, the water reflecting the soft light like a mirror. The fisherman's boat drifted lazily, almost blending into the serene surroundings. It was in this tranquil state that he almost missed the sight of a suitcase bobbing near the shore. At first glance, it seemed like a forgotten object, perhaps discarded by careless hands. But as he approached, the pungent odor reached his nostrils, thick, suffocating, impossible to ignore. The case was bound by chains, its once sharp edges now weathered and rusted. When the authorities managed to pry it open, they were confronted with a chilling sight. Not clothes, but hair, fingers frozen in a haunting grip, and at the bottom a cryptic message, "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer arrived at the scene, a handkerchief pressed delicately against her nose, her eyes taking in the grim tableau before her. The victim, a woman in her 30s with dark locks and now pallid skin marked by water's touch. The medical examiner worked meticulously, documenting each detail with precision. But what struck Mercer was not just the manner of disposal, but the eerie care taken in presenting the victim manicured nails, freshly styled hair, adorned in opulent attire. "She was not killed here," Mercer observed, her gaze fixed on the rippling water at the shore. "She was readied, showcased." The victim was identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent known for her dealings in high-end properties. Divorced, childless, residing alone in an affluent neighborhood, colleagues spoke of her ambition, her meticulous nature, her guarded privacy. She had vanished after failing to show up for a crucial showing with wealthy clients, an appointment she would never have missed, as her assistant vehemently attested. That sale meant everything to her, the assistant insisted during questioning. Investigations led to Walsh's impeccably modern home, a place of pristine order, almost unnaturally perfect. Designer furniture arranged meticulously, not a speck of dust to be found. The refrigerator stocked with neatly labeled meals, the closet housing clothes sorted by color and shoes protected in bags. But a hint of disarray surfaced in her home office, a slightly open drawer revealing a leather-bound journal. The final entry ominously stated, "He's watching again. Same car, different plates." Digital traces unveiled a puzzling pattern in Walsh's emails, repetitive messages from unknown senders, all bearing the phrase, "I see your perfection," delivered precisely at the same time on various days. Her browsing history hinted at searches for security systems and self-defense tools. Mercer connected these dots with the meticulous presentation of the victim's body, recognizing a methodical hand at play. "This was no crime of passion," she murmured to her partner. "This was a carefully orchestrated ritual." A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, a local pawn shop owner recognizing Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace among his wares, absent from her belongings. The man who had pawned it was a regular customer, Michael Linden, an unassuming maintenance worker. Surveillance footage revealed his frequent visits to Walsh's building, sometimes with his maintenance cart, sometimes without, always timing his presence with her absences during property showings. A search of Linden's modest abode uncovered a chilling collection, walls plastered with photos of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, all captured without their knowledge. Some images marked with red crosses. Walsh was the third victim. Behind a concealed panel in his closet lay a shrine, each victim's possessions meticulously arranged, a hairbrush with strands, tissues stained with lipstick, keys, receipts, accompanied by detailed notebooks chronicling their habits, preferences, and daily routines. The interrogation room turned icy as Linden was brought in. His demeanor remained composed, his voice devoid of emotion. "They were flawed," he finally uttered, his tone flat. "They pretended at perfection, but I saw their imperfections. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray. She missed a spot with her lipstick. Her perfection was a facade." The search for the two victims mentioned in Linden's note led investigators to remote locations where two more suitcases were unearthed, each holding women akin to Walsh real estate agents who projected an image of meticulous perfection. During the trial, Linden sat impassive, his face a mask, as the prosecution outlined his meticulous methods. Months of stalking, infiltrating their lives, and ultimately correcting what he deemed as their flaws before extinguishing their lives. Families of the victims watched in somber silence as the judge pronounced a life sentence without chance of parole. For Detective Mercer, the case was concluded, yet mysteries lingered. What had triggered Linden's fixation on these specific women? What inner flaw was he attempting to erase through his macabre acts? The river continued its unhurried journey downstream, its waters erasing all traces. But in Mercer's office, copies of those haunting notebooks remained a stark reminder that darkness can lurk beneath the veneer of everyday existence, and that sometimes the most perilous predators are those concealed in plain sight, waiting for a solitary flaw to expose itself. Story 20: The Enigmatic Manor. The new owners brushed off the crackling intercom as a quirky relic of the past, a forgotten feature of their Victorian manor. Nestled among ancient oak trees, the house exuded an aura of mystery, its exterior weathered but its interior modernized. Daniel and Meredith Parker, drawn to the property's history, had acquired it at a surprisingly reasonable price, the real estate agent's unease during the walkthrough adding to the intrigue. One fateful night, curiosity overcame the husband as he pressed the intercom button, unleashing a whisper that sent shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" The voice, eerie and spectral, startled him. His wife, startled, denied ever uttering those words. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor in response to a call about a possible break-in, but there was an unspoken depth to the situation. Daniel, visibly shaken, recounted how the intercom had started with static, then progressed to whispers and full sentences, a phenomenon that both he and his wife had experienced. In the living room, Meredith sat tense, gripping a steaming mug, her eyes haunted. She revealed a hidden journal discovered behind a wall during a renovation project. The journal belonged to Alina, the previous owner, detailing her fears of her husband Vincent's malevolent intentions. The final entry, 30 years old, marked the abrupt end of Alina's writings. Unraveling the mystery, Detective Reeves uncovered the tragic fate of Alina and the deceitful actions of Vincent Blackwood. Vincent's carefully crafted facade of his wife's departure crumbled as forensic evidence pointed to his guilt. The remains found beneath the garden shed confirmed Alina's tragic end at the hands of her husband. Vincent's confession revealed a chilling truth. He silenced Alina's voice through a heinous act, seeking peace and quiet at any cost. His manipulation of reality, sending forged postcards and maintaining a facade of innocence, was a testament to his deception. The trial swiftly concluded with Vincent's guilty plea, the judge acknowledging the calculated nature of the crime and the years of deceit that followed. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, sold the property after a solemn memorial for Alina in the restored garden. As the intercom system was removed by the new owners, whispers and static filled the air, a final acknowledgement of Alina's presence. Detective Reeves, reflecting on the case, recognized the house's eerie ability to reveal its secrets across time. The justice system may have caught up with Vincent, but it was Alina's voice that ultimately brought forth the truth. Driving past the manor on her way home, Detective Reeves would slow down, the window cracked open, listening for echoes of the past carried on the gentle breeze, a reminder of the enigmatic house that answered back. Story 21. Renovations always hold secrets waiting to be unearthed. Among the debris of old newspapers and forgotten trinkets, a couple stumbled upon a folded letter hidden beneath the floorboards of their Victorian-era home. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the message remained stark: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the cryptic warning, 3 sharp raps pierced the silence of the empty house, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah and Michael had been drawn to the charm and history of the house, purchased at an estate auction. Little did they know that their renovation project would reveal something deeply unsettling. Detective Alina Reed arrived, her partner by her side, the exposed floorboards revealing a dark void below. With weathered hands marked by years of investigating, Reed carefully retrieved the note, already tainted by the couple's touch. The couple's fear was palpable as they recounted the mysterious knocking. Background checks on Sarah and Michael turned up nothing suspicious, just a pair of newlyweds with solid jobs and good credit. But the house itself carried a more tangled past. Previously owned by the Hargrove family for generations, it had sat vacant for 2 years after the passing of the last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, an elderly widow. Neighbors remembered her as a recluse but kind. No enemies, no foul play in her demise, so the coroner stated. Yet a sense of unease lingered. Forensic analysis dated the note back 20 years, the handwriting betraying a sense of urgency and fear. Margaret would have been in her 60s at the time, living with her late husband, Franklin. Reed delved deeper into the history, uncovering fragments of a troubled past. Franklin, a retired teacher and skilled woodworker, had started exhibiting signs of paranoia in his final years. Former students recalled his unease, his mentions of being watched, but the breakthrough came from Margaret's sister, now residing in a nursing home. Through fading memories, she whispered of a debt collector who haunted Margaret with his relentless knocking 3 times, always 3. Reed's investigation took a grim turn as the forensic team combed through the house, unearthing a chilling truth beneath the foundation. Cadaver dogs led them to a hidden grave where a male skeleton lay, fractured skull and all. Dental records ruled out Franklin Hargrove. It was Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark and gambler who had vanished without a trace 2 decades prior. Pieces of the puzzle fell into place through forensic evidence and Margaret's diaries discovered in the attic. Franklin-esque gambling debts had spiraled out of control, leading to a deadly confrontation with Mercer. The workshop turned into a crime scene, the crawlspace a tomb. Margaret, out of fear and loyalty, had aided in the cover-up. As justice caught up with the long-buried truth, Sarah and Michael chose to part ways with the house, unable to bear its dark legacy. The property sat abandoned, renovations halted as whispers of the past haunted the halls. The note, a grim reminder of what lurked beneath, remained in evidence storage. Detective Reed closed the case, acknowledging that some mysteries defy complete unraveling. The house stood as a silent witness to a tale of betrayal and desperation, its walls holding secrets untold. And on certain nights, locals whispered of hearing 3 distinct knocks in the stillness, a chilling echo of the past that refused to fade. The truth, like the shadows in the empty house, remained elusive, leaving behind a haunting question. Whom should one truly trust in a world where secrets lie buried beneath the surface? Story 22, the apartment lay dormant, untouched by life for months on end. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, their expectations were tempered, only dust and perhaps a few remnants of the past awaited them. Yet one door remained stubbornly closed, its secrets hidden within. It was a closet, its lock steadfastly keeping its contents concealed. With a final push, the landlord broke the barrier, anticipating forgotten belongings or outdated relics. But what greeted them sent a shiver down their spines. The walls bore witness to a haunting tale, etched with deep, jagged scratches as if pleading for release. And nestled in the shadows, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its once vibrant battery extinguished save for the single unread message that glowed eerily on its screen. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator, had encountered her fair share of grim scenes in her storied career. However, this sight stirred a primal unease within her, not from the sight of blood or overt violence, but from the silent echoes of struggle that lingered in those claw marks, a silent plea for freedom. "We need forensics here immediately," she directed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured each scratch on camera, "and fetch me the records of the previous tenants." The cryptic message on the phone simply stated, "I know what you did." The landlord, a jittery figure with perpetually clammy hands, recounted how the prior tenant had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent. A young woman kept to herself, left suddenly about 6 months back, he stammered, his gaze skirting away from the closet, never caused a stir. Forensic analysis unveiled a chilling revelation, traces of blood intertwined with the scratch marks on the walls. Most samples matched a single individual, presumably the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old woman reported absent from her job, yet 2 distinct DNA profiles emerged. One remained a mystery to the authorities, while the other belonged to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. "This defies reason," Shaw muttered, studying the perplexing lab results. Derek Mercer, a known criminal who had met his end in a tragic accident, now seemingly resurrected through his genetic imprint left behind in the closet. Emma's abode painted a poignant narrative of a life abruptly halted. Unopened mail scattered, a forgotten mug in the sink, a bed neatly arranged. Her call logs revealed a sudden silence after regular conversations with her sister. Additionally, numerous calls from an unknown number in the weeks leading to her disappearance puzzled the investigators. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed relayed. No name, just described as intense and private. Surveillance footage captured Emma's arrival at her building one fateful night, trailed discreetly by a shadowy figure in a baseball cap, evading the watchful eyes of security cameras. The breakthrough emerged when partial fingerprints belonging to Derek Mercer surfaced on the closet's interior doorknob. He staged his demise, Shaw deduced. But why and what ties him to Emma? The unidentified DNA sample led the team to another unsolved mystery: Lynette Porter, missing for 3 years. Witnesses recalled a woman resembling Lynette frequenting Emma's residence. Through meticulous scrutiny of traffic cameras, a car linked to Derek's family circled Emma's neighborhood, manned by an individual matching his stature. The trail led to a remote estate owned by the Mercer clan, where behind fortified doors in the basement, Lynette Porter was discovered alive yet emaciated, a mirror image of Emma's harrowing ordeal in the closet. "He forced me to witness," Lynette murmured, her gaze vacant, "said I needed to understand the consequences of defiance." The mounting evidence painted a grim portrait of Mercer's fixation on dominance, with journals chronicling his twisted desires, photographs of his unsuspecting victims, and damning footage of Emma's captivity. "She thought she could expose me," his voice echoed in the recordings. "No one reveals my truths." The manhunt for Derek Mercer spanned jurisdictions, unraveling a chilling profile of a predator reveling in the agony of his captives. As the authorities closed in on him at a bus terminal, Mercer clutched a new identity and a ticket to an unknown destination. In his possession, a roll of duct tape, a blade, and a news clipping detailing Emma's disappearance. During interrogation, Mercer exuded a disconcerting serenity. "She penned that message herself," he insisted, pointing to the phone. "She sought rescue but didn't merit salvation." The trial unveiled Mercer's elaborate charade of evading justice by assuming a false identity, cloaked in the guise of a deceased vagrant. For years he prowled in obscurity, preying on women reminiscent of his initial victim. Emma's remains were never recovered. Forensic analysis hinted at her tragic demise within that claustrophobic closet, her futile pleas etched into the unforgiving walls. The cryptic message on the phone had been her final gambit to expose her captor sent from Mercer's device while he slumbered, a silent testament to her fight for justice. After a brief deliberation, the jury rendered a unanimous verdict of guilt on all charges. As the judge pronounced a life sentence sans parole, a faint smile flickered across Mercer's lips, a private satisfaction veiled in enigmatic logic. At the sentencing, Lynette Porter confronted her tormentor. "He ensnared us in confined spaces because that's where his soul resides, entombed in darkness. While he withers away in his cell, I'll bask in the sunlight." The case catalyzed a paradigm shift in missing persons investigations, emphasizing the scrutiny of relational dynamics and rental properties. Detective Shaw enshrined the closet door from Emma's apartment in her office, a poignant symbol that horrors transcended mere physical violence, encapsulated in the poignant struggle for survival etched on those walls. Story 23. In the quiet stillness of an abandoned house, a phone sat on the dusty kitchen counter, its screen glowing faintly. Detective Morgan Reed pressed the playback button, her brow furrowed in concentration. The voice on the recording echoed through the empty rooms, a whisper frantic and filled with fear. "He's here, he," and then silence. The house belonged to the Sullivan family, but it had been empty for years, ever since a devastating fire had driven them away. Detective Reed and her partner, Detective Walsh, were puzzled by the mysterious call. The number traced back to Catherine Sullivan, who had tragically passed away in a car accident 3 years prior. As they delved deeper into the case, they found no logical explanation for the strange occurrence. The phone seemed to have appeared out of thin air, with no signs of forced entry or disturbance in the house. The forensic team uncovered no fingerprints, no footprints, just an eerie sense of something inexplicable. The recording of the call became the focal point of their investigation. 11 seconds of static, breathing, and those 5 haunting words. Voice analysis confirmed it was Catherine's voice, with a timestamp matching the exact moment of her death years ago. Interviews with Catherine's loved ones revealed a troubling journal detailing a relationship filled with control and fear. The final entry hinted at danger, at a looming threat that had ultimately led to Catherine's demise. As the investigation progressed, a chilling discovery was made near the site of Catherine's fatal accident, a buried phone, revealing deleted texts that painted a grim picture of her final moments. The evidence pointed towards her ex-boyfriend, Mark, an emergency responder with a dark past. Mark's twisted manipulation came to light, a ghostly call meant to deceive, to sow confusion and doubt. His obsession with Catherine had driven him to unspeakable acts, leaving a trail of tragedy in his wake. When Mark was finally apprehended, he spoke of silencing Catherine, of needing her voice to fade into the shadows. But justice prevailed, not through the realm of the supernatural, but through the bravery of a victim who refused to be silenced. As the jury delivered their verdict, Catherine's mother clutched the journal close to her heart, a symbol of closure and vindication. The phone from the abandoned house remained in the evidence locker, a silent witness to the resilience of those who refused to be forgotten. And so, the tale of Catherine Sullivan lives on not as a ghost story, but as a testament to the enduring power of a voice that refuses to be extinguished. In the darkness of the night, the phone may still echo a phantom, ring a reminder that even in silence, the truth will find its way to the surface. Story 24. The motel stood as a relic of forgotten times, its worn façade hinting at stories untold. To weary travelers, it was a brief respite, a place to lay their heads for a night. The receptionist passed her the key with a cryptic glance, a warning hidden in his eyes. "Just avoid the last door on the left," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. Intrigue tugged at her curiosity, urging her to explore the forbidden. That evening, bathed in the flickering light of the hallway, she found herself standing before the ominous door. The brass handle sent a shiver through her fingertips, icy to the touch. At first glance, it appeared no different from its neighbors, blending seamlessly with the faded wallpaper. But as she pressed her ear against its surface, a soft, rhythmic breath met her, a presence lingering on the other side. Detective Morgan Reed emerged from the haze of sleep, entering the crime scene with a sense of foreboding. The air was heavy with the scent of copper, a familiar tang that spoke of tragedy. Blood had seeped into the fibers of the carpet, a stark contrast against the sterile bathroom and undisturbed bed. The lifeless form of a young woman lay before her, golden locks splayed like a halo, eyes fixed on an unseen horizon. Crouching beside the victim, Reed absorbed the scene with a practiced eye, noting the absence of struggle or defense. The forensic technician murmured about a recurring pattern, a signature left behind by a merciless hand. The victim's attire hinted at a life of elegance, a stark contrast to the motel's neglected surroundings. This was no crime of opportunity. It bore the mark of a meticulous predator. Back at the precinct, Reed delved into the case, piecing together fragments of a chilling puzzle. 3 women, each found in similar motels, each meeting a fate too cruel to comprehend. The whispers of a serial killer loomed over the city, casting a shadow of fear. Autopsy results revealed the cause of death: strangulation, intimate and brutal. The absence of DNA evidence beneath the victim's nails hinted at a calculated killer, one who left no trace of their presence. Reed sensed a personal vendetta driving the crimes, a motive rooted in darkness. Days blurred into nights as the investigation deepened, unraveling threads of deceit and betrayal. The victim's sister unveiled a secret liaison, a man known only as C, shrouded in mystery and deceit. Reed's pursuit led her to Charles Emerson, a man of power and influence, harboring secrets darker than the night itself. Emerson's polished facade crumbled under scrutiny, revealing a web of lies and manipulation. The pieces fell into place as evidence linked him to the heinous crimes, a trail of deceit leading to his downfall. The truth emerged in chilling clarity: Emerson's twisted desires, his insatiable thirst for control. In the courtroom, justice prevailed, condemning Emerson to a lifetime behind bars. His hollow gaze met Reed's briefly, a glimpse into the abyss of his soul. The media dubbed it the Door on the Left case, a tale of horror and manipulation that gripped the nation. But for Reed, the echoes of that night lingered, haunting her steps down empty corridors. The keys to those forbidden rooms remained locked away, reminders of the darkness that dwelled behind closed doors. Some secrets, once uncovered, could never be erased, their echoes reverberating through the silence of the night. Story 25: The Enigmatic Porcelain Doll. They stumbled upon it in the attic, concealed beneath a worn blanket. A porcelain doll, fragile and ancient, with its vivid blue eyes staring wide and unwavering. It was unfamiliar to both of them. They dismissed it with a laugh, just another neglected relic. Yet that night, as they retired to bed, an unsettling presence lingered. The atmosphere grew dense, the quiet pressing in. And come morning, the doll was no longer in the attic. It sat at the foot of their bed. Sarah and Michael, a young couple, had acquired the Victorian house at auction, captivated by its intricate woodwork and enigmatic allure despite whispers of a troubled past. They were drawn to the tales woven into its very foundation. Little did they know they would soon become entwined in them. Detective Rachel Winters received the call on a brisk autumn morning. The female victim was discovered in the master bedroom, her body contorted into an unnatural stance, limbs bent at precise angles, eyes wide with terror etched on her face. The male victim was found in the hallway, almost as if he had been attempting to flee. The scene was pristine, no signs of forced entry, no traces of a struggle beyond those final moments. "The positioning is deliberate," Detective Winters murmured, her voice hushed as she spoke into her recorder, while crime scene photographers meticulously documented every detail. "The female victim seems posed, akin to a doll plucked from a display." The inquiry commenced with extensive interviews of neighbors. One elderly resident recalled glimpsing a shadow flit behind an upstairs window during the couple's expected absence. Another mentioned hearing what resembled a child's laughter emanating from the vacant house through the night. Each anecdote added a layer of disquiet to the burgeoning case file. Forensic analysis unveiled minuscule fibers throughout the resident's vintage cotton and silk, echoing the fabrics used in antique doll attire. The fibers were most concentrated around the victims' bodies and the attic space. More perplexing was the absence of certain findings. No fingerprints save for the victims, no foreign DNA, no footprints in the dust that defied explanation. "It's as though the perpetrator was never physically present," remarked the chief forensic analyst. The focus shifted to the property's history. Records disclosed a pattern: 3 prior owners across 6 decades had met mysterious ends. Each case remained unresolved, with reports detailing peculiar irregularities. One family recounted discovering antique toys in rooms they had just cleaned. Another logged hearing footsteps when the house should have been empty. Detective Winters unearthed a newspaper clipping from decades past. A famed doll maker had once resided in the house with his daughter. The girl had met a suspicious demise, and though the father was interrogated, he was never charged. Before taking his own life, he had fashioned one final doll alleged to be an exact replica of his daughter. The inventory list from Sarah and Michael's purchase made no mention of such a doll. As Detective Winters delved deeper, a connection emerged among all the victims. Each had made alterations to the house, particularly to the attic space. Sarah and Michael had commenced renovations a week before their demise, intending to convert the attic into a workspace. A breakthrough arrived with the discovery of old photographs concealed in a secret compartment beneath the attic floorboards. The images, in black and white, depicted the doll maker with his creations, one doll standing out identical to the one initially found by Sarah and Michael. In these photos, the doll seemed to shift positions, almost as if it were moving between snapshots taken moments apart. Infrared scans of the walls unveiled a chilling truth: faint handprints, invisible to the naked eye, trailing from the attic to the master bedroom, alongside an enigmatic residue comprising porcelain dust blended with unidentifiable organic matter. The case took an unexpected twist when Detective Winters interviewed a distant relative of the doll maker. The woman divulged family lore about the doll maker employing unconventional materials and methods, supposedly infusing his prized creations with human elements to breathe life into them. She spoke of rituals performed to bind spirits to objects, knowledge the doll maker had acquired in his worldly travels. The most exquisite dolls, she whispered, were never mere playthings. Following that revelation, the investigation hit a standstill. No suspects emerged, no conventional rationale aligned with the evidence. The case remained open yet grew cold. Detective Winters petitioned to retain the doll as evidence, securing it in a locked cabinet at the precinct. The morning after, officers found her office door ajar, the cabinet empty. The detective herself was located at her desk, bewildered but unharmed, devoid of recollection from the previous night. Surveillance footage showed naught but static during the mysterious hours. The house was auctioned off once more, its plagued history dampening its value despite its architectural grandeur. The new occupants discovered the attic barren save for a neatly folded tattered blanket in a corner. The doll was never found, and the deaths of Sarah and Michael were added to the roster of unsolved mysteries whispered about in the precinct. Rumors circulated of glimpses of the doll in storage, though inventory audits never verified its presence. Detective Winters retired prematurely, citing personal motives. On her final day, she withdrew a solitary item from her private files, a photograph of the doll maker and his collection. She sealed it in an envelope labeled "Never Open" and stowed it away. The new owners reported no disturbances, opting to leave the attic undisturbed. Yet on tranquil evenings, neighbors claimed to spot a slight shadow behind the attic window and hear what resembled the soft laughter of a child. Story 26: The Enigmatic Whispers. She had a desire to refresh the nursery before the arrival of the little one. The walls of the room wore a faded blue, a hue that whispered of years gone by, of untold tales buried within its layers. As she applied the first stroke of white paint, a hidden mystery began to unfold. Beneath the fresh coat, faint letters emerged, gradually sharpening into a clear message. Don't let it hear you. Her breath hitched in her throat as she took a step back, her gaze capturing something unsettling: tiny handprints imprinted in the wet paint, positioned too high for a child's reach. The revelation within the nursery of the Morgan house marked the outset of what would later become known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style residence just a few months prior, lured in by an unbelievably low price tag. The real estate agent had casually mentioned some minor cosmetic issues, conveniently omitting any mention of the property's shadowy past. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the residence, her notebook clasped in hand. The door creaked open to reveal a pregnant woman, her belly protruding beneath paint-splattered overalls. Dark circles encircled her tired eyes, a testament to sleepless nights. The detective observed the tremor in the woman's hands as she recounted the eerie discovery of the concealed message and handprints. The previous occupants vanished abruptly, the woman explained. The neighbors claimed they departed in the dead of night without a moving truck, only loading essentials into their car. Detective Klein ventured through the historic abode, her footsteps echoing on aged floorboards. Standing in the nursery, she scrutinized the partially painted wall, the cryptic message still visible, the childlike handprints a chilling reminder of the unknown. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into records pertaining to the property. The house had changed ownership 8 times in 3 decades, an unusually high turnover rate. Alarming were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of the families who had dwelled there. Children had spoken of whispers from the walls and feeling watched as they slept. The detective delved further, unearthing construction logs and historical archives. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who had operated an orphanage on the premises during the industrial era. Tragic tales emerged of 5 children who had vanished from her care, presumed to have run away. Interviewing former residents, Detective Klein pieced together a disconcerting pattern. Each family with children had encountered peculiar incidents, objects shifting overnight, childish laughter resonating through empty corridors, and crayon drawings materializing on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as mere figments of imagination until the cryptic writing surfaced during redecoration. A forensic linguist analyzed the script, linking it to samples from Eleanor Blackwood's journals. More unnerving were the handprints uniform in size and placement despite different children residing in the house over the years. The investigation took a macabre turn when the detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar scanning in the basement. The technician identified anomalies in the readings, 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's form. Breaking through the concrete, they unearthed a grim confirmation, 5 sets of tiny remains arranged in a circle. Forensic analysis indicated the children had perished during Eleanor's tenure in the house, each adorned with a pendant bearing their engraved names. Luminol was sprayed across the nursery, revealing glowing handprints on every wall, concealed beneath layers of paint, invisible to the naked eye. Countless imprints scattered at various heights as though the children had sought to escape. Eleanor's journals, retrieved from county archives, unveiled her twisted beliefs, a delusion that orphaned children possessed a unique spiritual essence which she sought to harness for her own longevity. The case concluded with the dignified burial of the 5 victims, their true fate acknowledged as murder victims rather than runaways. The house stood vacant thereafter, the expectant couple adamant in their refusal to return, even for their possessions. Detective Klein filed her final report, documenting the luminol-illuminated handprints and the hidden message beneath the paint. Although justice had been served for the original victims, an enigmatic presence lingered in the house, reaching out through layers of paint and time. The nursery walls were raised during cleanup, yet workers reported hearing whispers of children emanating from the debris. None dared to linger after their shift ended. The house was eventually deemed uninhabitable, another unsolved enigma consigned to the archives, a reminder that some mysteries transcend closure, leaving spiritual questions unanswered. The detective retained a photograph from the case, a haunting image of 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a poignant reminder that certain crimes etch impressions that no amount of fresh paint can erase. Story 27. The tale unfurls in a realm where the shadows dance with secrets, where the whispers of the night hold mysteries untold. Listen now as the story weaves its intricate web of intrigue, drawing you into a world where a costume shop, brimming with forgotten treasures, becomes the stage for a chilling encounter. As the twilight descended upon the town, the costume shop prepared to close its doors forever, casting a melancholic aura over the fading inventory. Amidst the relics of eras past, a woman lingered, her eyes drawn to a mask perched upon a dusty shelf. Delicate yet unnervingly lifelike, its features beckoned to her, stirring something deep within her soul. With a sense of curiosity, she lifted the mask and carried it to the counter, where the cashier's eyes flickered with hesitation as it met his gaze. "That's not ours," he muttered cryptically, a shiver running down his spine. Bewildered, the woman inspected the mask, only to find no tag adorning its eerie visage. Undeterred, she decided to claim it as her own and carried it home, unaware of the fateful turn her path was about to take. That fateful night, as the moon cast its silvery glow through the curtains, a soft sound stirred the silence of the woman's slumber. A whisper, faint as a sigh, echoed through the darkness, drawing her from her dreams. Startled, she blinked into wakefulness, her heart quickening as she realized the mask was no longer resting upon her dresser where she had left it. Instead, it sat upon her nightstand, its enigmatic countenance turned towards her, as if watching, waiting. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, would never be seen alive again. It was her neighbor who stumbled upon the chilling scene the next morning, the front door left ajar, a beacon of morning light piercing the gloom of her home. The borrowed book intended for return lay forgotten, as the neighbor's eyes beheld a sight that would haunt the corridors of the mind for years to come. Detective Morgan arrived, a figure cloaked in shadows of inquiry, as forensics meticulously documented the scene of tragedy. The shutter of the camera clicked in rhythm with the hushed whispers that lingered in the air like ghosts of the past. "No signs of forced entry," remarked an officer, the scratch of pen against paper punctuating the solemn silence. The detective, with eyes keen and mind sharp, scanned the room, seeking the elusive truth that danced just beyond reach. Amidst the ordinary tableau of the room, a solitary drawer ajar, a lipstick-stained watered glass, lay the extraordinary figure of Catherine, her life extinguished in the darkness of the night. The medical examiner, a harbinger of grim revelations, knelt by her side, his voice grave as he pronounced the chilling verdict. The cause of her demise shrouded in mystery, her expression frozen in a mask of terror. Catherine, a connoisseur of art and authenticity, had lived a life steeped in quietude and precision. Her colleagues spoke of her with reverence, her discerning eye a beacon of truth in a world of deception. Yet it seemed that her keen perception had led her down a path fraught with peril, a path that would lead to her ultimate fate. The tendrils of the investigation stretched further, delving into the enigmatic origins of the mask that had ensnared Catherine in its sinister embrace. Security footage from the now desolate costume shop unveiled a cryptic clue, the cashier's perplexed expression mirroring the shop owner's denial of the mask's provenance. A tale woven with threads of intrigue began to unravel, revealing a dark tapestry of death and deception. The owner of the shop, haunted by the specters of the past, confessed to a legacy of unexplained occurrences tied to the masks that had once adorned the shelves. A collector's estate sale, shrouded in shadows of tragedy, held the key to the sinister puzzle that had claimed Catherine's life and countless others before her. Forensics unearthed a chilling revelation: microscopic fibers embedded in Catherine's grasp, a spectral echo of her final moments of terror. The fibers, a bizarre amalgamation of human hair and an otherworldly substance, defied identification, casting a veil of uncertainty over the investigation. A retired detective, a keeper of dark secrets, emerged from the shadows of the past to shed light upon the unsolved mysteries that lingered like phantoms in the night. With trembling hands, he revealed a hidden truth, a truth etched in ancient symbols found within the masks of the fallen, a ritual of soul transference, a dance of death and rebirth. Yet the true revelation came from Catherine herself, her journal a testament to the horrors that lurked in the shadows of her existence. In fevered words, she chronicled the malevolent presence that haunted her, the mask's insidious gaze that followed her every move. A pattern emerged, a pattern of death and despair that transcended time and space, a cycle of darkness that sought a new vessel with each passing soul. The detective, her resolve steeling against the encroaching darkness, pieced together the fragments of the puzzle, the threads of fate drawing taut around her. The medical examiner's final diagnosis, a heart stilled by unbridled fear, echoed through the corridors of the night, a chilling reminder of the malevolent force that dwelled within the mask. As the investigation delved deeper into the abyss of the unknown, a revelation emerged from the shadows, a figure, cloaked in the stolen guise of Catherine, departing her home under the cover of night. A phantom, a specter of dread, moving with an unnatural grace that belied its inhuman origin. The hunt for the missing mask, a quest fraught with peril and uncertainty, led the investigators on a trail that twisted and turned through the labyrinth of time. Reports of its reappearance across the country, a harbinger of doom for its unwitting bearer, sent shivers down the spines of those who knew its dark legacy. And so the mask eluded capture, slipping through the fingers of justice like a wraith in the night. Its insidious purpose remained shrouded in mystery, its hunger for souls unabated. The detective, keeper of Catherine's journal and witness to the darkness that lurked within, knew that the mask's malevolent power would endure, waiting patiently for the next victim to cross its path. As the night descended once more, casting its veil of shadows over the world, the detective stirred from her slumber, a chill creeping down her spine. The echoes of the past whispered through the darkness, a reminder of the mask that awaited its next host, its empty eyes fixed upon the unknowing. And so the cycle continued, a dance of death and despair that spanned centuries, a tale too strange for the light of day. The mask, a vessel of malevolence, slumbered in the shadows, biding its time until it found its next victim, its hunger insatiable, its gaze unrelenting. As you drift into the realm of dreams, remember the tale of the mask that haunts the night, its secrets buried in the depths of the unknown. May sleep enfold you in its gentle embrace, shielding you from the darkness that lurks just beyond the edge of consciousness. Good night, weary traveler, and may your dreams be free from the specters of the night.